In a small town that seemed frozen in time, nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, the air was thick with an inexplicable sense of foreboding. It was the kind of place where rumors spread like wildfire, where every street corner held a secret and every house had a story. At the heart of this town stood a grand, dilapidated mansion known as Ravenswood Manor. Locals whispered about the ancient estate, claiming it was haunted by the spirits of its former residents, who vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. Yet this ominous reputation only seemed to attract the curious and the reckless, drawing them closer to its dark history. On an ordinary Thursday afternoon, Claire, a bright-eyed university student with a passion for the paranormal, received an unusual envelope in the mail. The envelope was thick and heavy, its paper worn and yellowed with age. Eagerly, she tore it open, revealing a beautifully crafted invitation that read, "You are cordially invited to a night of secrets at Ravenswood Manor." A chill ran down her spine, but her intrigue overpowered her apprehension. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a chance to explore the legendary manor and uncover its mysteries. Without hesitation, she accepted the invitation, unaware of the horrors that awaited her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, Claire made her way to Ravenswood Manor. The towering structure loomed ahead, its cracked windows and weathered facade only adding to its sinister allure. The invitation had instructed her to arrive at precisely 7 p.m., and as she approached, she could see flickering candlelight spilling from the windows, hinting at life within the decaying walls. The air was thick with tension as she pushed open the creaking front door, stepping into a dimly lit foyer filled with the scent of aged wood and something far more unsettling. Inside, a small group of individuals mingled, each wearing a mask adorned with intricate designs that concealed their identities. Laughter echoed through the halls, mingling with the unsettling whispers of the past. Claire felt a surge of anxiety. The atmosphere was intoxicating yet disconcerting. She noticed an older man in a dark suit who seemed to be the host. His piercing gaze scanned the room, and Claire felt an inexplicable pull toward him. It was as if he held the key to the manor's secrets, but she was also wary of the shadow that lingered in his eyes. As the clock struck 7, the man clapped his hands, commanding silence. "Welcome, dear guests," he announced, his voice smooth yet chilling. "Tonight, you will each share a secret of your own, and in return, I will unveil a secret of Ravenswood Manor. But be warned, not all secrets are meant to be shared." The room fell silent, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Claire's heart raced. She had always loved secrets, but now, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily upon her. The other guests exchanged nervous glances, each pondering their own hidden truths. One by one, the guests revealed their secrets, some trivial and others haunting. A woman confessed to an affair, a young man admitted to a theft, and an elderly lady spoke of a long-lost love. Claire listened intently, captivated by the confessions that unraveled before her. Yet, the more she heard, the more she realized that each secret was entwined with a darkness that seemed to seep from the walls of the manor itself. When it was finally her turn, she hesitated, contemplating the weight of her own truth. She decided to share a memory of her childhood, of the nightmares that haunted her, of a shadowy figure that whispered her name. The room grew still, and Claire felt the temperature drop as her voice faded. The man in the suit leaned forward, his eyes glimmering with intrigue. "Ah, childhood fears," he mused. "They often linger, manifesting in ways we cannot comprehend. But tonight, dear Claire, you may face your darkest fear." A collective gasp swept through the guests, their curiosity piqued. Claire felt a chill settle over her as she glanced around the room, realizing that her admission had drawn them into something much deeper than a mere game. Suddenly, the lights flickered and dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the masked guests. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, and an unsettling laughter echoed through the halls, as if the very walls were alive. Claire's heart raced as she looked to the older man for reassurance, but he had vanished into the shadows, leaving her alone with her fears. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices echoing her name, taunting her with a nightmare she had long tried to forget. It was then that she understood. The invitation was not just a call to explore Ravenswood Manor. It was an entrapment, a sinister ploy to awaken the secrets buried within. As panic began to rise within her, Claire's thoughts raced. What was this place? What were these people? She looked around, desperate for an escape, but the heavy oak door stood firmly shut, locking her inside a nightmare of her own making. A sense of impending doom loomed over her as she realized she was not just a guest. She was a pawn in a twisted game orchestrated by unseen forces. In that moment, Claire resolved to uncover the truth behind the invitation and the malevolent energy pulsating through the manor. But little did she know, the secrets of Ravenswood Manor were far more treacherous than she could ever imagine. With each heartbeat, the shadows thickened, and Claire braced herself for the darkness that was about to unfold. The night had only just begun, and the invitation had set into motion a chain of events that would challenge her very sanity and unveil the horrific legacy of Ravenswood Manor. The air inside Ravenswood Manor was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint rustle of fabric and the occasional flicker of candlelight. Claire felt as though she had stepped into another world, one where time stood still and the shadows danced with malevolence. The once vibrant laughter of the guests had been replaced by an eerie hush that echoed her own racing heartbeat. Every corner of the grand room felt like a potential hiding place for the secrets the manor harbored, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As Claire's gaze swept over the other guests, she noted their expressions. Some were intrigued, while others appeared anxious, their masks concealing fear more than excitement. The woman who had shared about her affair now stood trembling, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were her only lifeline. The elderly lady's eyes darted around the room, searching for something, or perhaps someone, in the shadows. This collective anxiety heightened Claire's own apprehension, deepening the sense that they were not merely participants in a game, but rather trapped in a scenario far beyond their control. The host, who had disappeared moments before, suddenly reappeared, a wry smile curving his lips. "Let the revelations begin," he announced, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "What you share tonight will reveal not only who you are, but will also stir the spirits of Ravenswood. Secrets have a way of awakening that which sleeps." His words dripped with an unsettling glee, as though he relished the impending chaos. Claire shivered, a primal instinct urging her to flee, but her feet felt rooted to the ground, caught in the web of the unknown. With a sudden flourish, the host gestured toward a grand staircase that spiraled into darkness. "To the attic we go. The most haunted part of this house holds the truths you seek." A murmur rippled through the group, curiosity intermingled with dread. Claire felt an inexplicable pull toward the staircase. Despite the very real danger she sensed, her desire to understand the enigmatic nature of Ravenswood Manor outweighed her fear. With hesitant resolve, she followed the host, ascending the staircase that groaned beneath their weight. The attic door creaked open to reveal a room shrouded in shadows. Dust motes floated lazily in the beam of light from a single, flickering bulb, and Claire felt a rush of nostalgia as she took in the vintage trunks and forgotten relics that lay scattered about. But this sense of comfort quickly faded as she noticed the walls adorned with photographs of previous occupants, their eyes seemingly alive, watching her with a knowing gaze. The air was charged with a heavy tension, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the memories contained within this attic were not just relics of the past. They were alive, ready to ensnare the unwary. "Each of these photographs holds a story," the host declared, his voice now a whisper that barely rose above the stillness. "Tonight, we will uncover the tale of one unfortunate soul. Who will begin?" A silence fell over the group as everyone exchanged uncertain glances. The host's gaze lingered on Claire, his interest piqued. She felt an uncomfortable heat rise in her cheeks, realizing that her earlier admission had placed her in the spotlight once again. Steeling herself, Claire stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "What about this one?" She pointed to a faded photograph of a young girl, her expression hauntingly vacant, standing in front of the very mansion they inhabited. The room seemed to shudder at her words, the shadows stretching as if in response to her choice. The host's smile widened, a glimmer of delight sparking in his eyes. "Ah, brave one! The girl you see was named Eliza, and her story is one of heartache and despair." As the host began to recount Eliza's tragic tale, Claire listened with rapt attention. Eliza had lived in the manor over a century ago, a bright spirit whose laughter once echoed through its halls. However, her life took a dark turn when her family fell victim to a series of inexplicable tragedies: a fire, a sickness, a betrayal. Each loss seemed to drive Eliza deeper into madness until one fateful night, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling whispers of the wind. The air around Claire seemed to pulse with the weight of sorrow, and she felt a kinship with the girl, as though Eliza's spirit was somehow intertwined with her own. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted and the temperature in the attic plummeted. A cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the flickering bulb. In the engulfing darkness, Claire's heart raced as she strained to hear over the sudden silence. A faint whisper pierced the air, a voice echoing her name. "Claire," it breathed, a voice both familiar and distant. Panic surged within her, and she felt an overwhelming urge to escape. "We should go back," she murmured, her voice barely audible. But the others remained transfixed, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Before she could voice her concern again, the attic door slammed shut, trapping them within the confines of the chilling darkness. A rush of adrenaline coursed through Claire as she felt the walls closing in, the shadows shifting as if alive. The host's voice rose above the commotion, commanding and almost intoxicating, urging the guests to face their fears. The atmosphere was electric, each heartbeat reverberating through the confined space. Claire's instinct screamed at her to fight against the chaos, to break free from the oppressive shadows that were beginning to swirl around them. In that moment of fear, Claire understood that Ravenswood Manor was more than just a haunted house. It was a living entity, thriving on the secrets and fears of those who dared to enter. And as the whispers grew louder, she realized that the invitation was not merely a summons. It was a test, a dark invitation to confront the demons lurking within her and those around her. With every ounce of courage she could muster, Claire steeled herself for the trials that lay ahead, determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers in the dark, even if it meant facing the very shadows that haunted her. As Claire stood in the suffocating darkness of the attic, her heart pounded like a war drum, urging her to escape the confining space that felt increasingly hostile. The shadows were thick, swirling around her like mist, as if the very fabric of Ravenswood Manor sought to ensnare her. She could hear the whispers more clearly now, a chorus of voices rising and falling in a haunting melody that echoed her own fears. It was a cacophony of lost souls, each entwined with the manor's tragic history. Yet, amid the chaos, a sense of purpose began to awaken within her. She understood that the only way to escape this nightmare was to confront the darkness head-on. The host's voice cut through the din, luring the guests into a trance with the promise of revelation. "Tonight, you shall uncover not only Eliza's story, but also the legacy of this forgotten town," he proclaimed, his tone reverberating through the suffocating shadows. Claire's curiosity flared once more. She had always been fascinated by history and the secrets of the past. Yet this was not just any history. It was laced with tragedy, betrayal, and loss, each thread woven into the very essence of Ravenswood Manor. The host beckoned to a large, ornate trunk in the corner, its surface marred by age and neglect. He slowly opened it, revealing an array of dusty journals and weathered maps that seemed to pulsate with a life of their own. "These are the chronicles of Ravenswood and the town that cradles it," he said, his fingers delicately brushing over the items. "Within these pages lie the truths you must unearth." The guests shifted restlessly, torn between fear and intrigue. Claire felt drawn to the trunk, an invisible force pulling her closer as she grasped the implications of what lay within. As the host selected a faded journal, he began to read aloud, his voice echoing through the attic like a ghostly chant. The words painted a vivid picture of the town's history, its once thriving community now reduced to whispers on the wind. Claire learned of the town's founding families, their hopes, dreams, and inevitable tragedies. Each generation bore witness to horrors, mysterious deaths, unexplained disappearances, and a growing darkness that seeped into the very soil of the land. The town had become a pariah, shunned by neighboring communities, a forgotten relic lost in the annals of time. Suddenly, a chilling realization struck Claire. The town was not just a backdrop to the manor's story. It was intricately linked to the unfolding drama. The tragedies that befell its inhabitants were not isolated events, but part of a larger tapestry of despair that bound them to Ravenswood Manor. The echoes of their suffering resonated within the walls, feeding the spirits that lurked in the shadows. Claire's heart raced as the implications settled in. She had stepped into a web of history that was alive and malignant, a force that refused to let go. The atmosphere shifted once more, and Claire felt a cold breath against her neck. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What happened to Eliza?" she blurted, desperate to anchor herself to a single thread in the tangled narrative. The host paused, a knowing smile creeping across his face. "Ah, dear Eliza," he said softly, "her fate is entwined with the very essence of this town. To understand her, you must confront the darkness that lies beneath." His words hung in the air, thick with menace, as if they carried a curse all their own. The host's eyes gleamed with a dark excitement as he turned to the maps in the trunk. "Here," he said, unfurling a brittle parchment that depicted the town in its former glory. "These streets, once vibrant and filled with life, now lie dormant, haunted by the souls who once walked them. But there are places, hidden paths, and forgotten corners, where the veil between our world and theirs grows thin." Claire's mind raced with possibilities. What if these hidden paths held the key to understanding Eliza's fate, and perhaps a way to release the spirits trapped within Ravenswood Manor? Driven by a newfound determination, Claire addressed the group. "We need to explore the town," she urged, her voice gaining strength. "If the history of Ravenswood is tied to the town, then we can't ignore it." The others exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, while others hesitated, fear gripping them. Yet, the host merely chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Claire's spine. "Very well, but remember, dear guests, curiosity can be a dangerous companion." With a flick of his wrist, he extinguished the remaining candle, plunging the room into darkness once more. The only light came from the moon filtering through the attic window, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. Claire felt a surge of fear, but also an exhilaration at the prospect of exploring the forgotten town. As the door creaked open, she took a deep breath, the promise of uncovering the truth igniting a fire within her. The group descended the staircase, the tension palpable. As they exited the manor, the chill of the night air washed over them, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the attic. Claire squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The moonlight illuminated the path ahead, leading them into the heart of the town, a place where laughter had once flourished, now shrouded in a heavy silence. As they ventured deeper into the forgotten streets, Claire felt a strange pull toward the first house on the left. Its dilapidated structure loomed ominously, the windows boarded up as if to keep the secrets of the past from escaping. The whispers grew louder, echoing her name once more, urging her to step inside. She hesitated, but felt a strong compulsion to uncover what lay hidden within its walls. This town, with all its forgotten dreams and unspoken fears, was waiting for her to awaken its ghosts, to unearth the stories that had been buried for far too long. And so, with a racing heart and a mind full of questions, Claire stepped forward into the shadows, ready to confront the darkness that awaited her. The atmosphere surrounding the first house on the left was thick with anticipation as Claire and the other guests approached its weathered door. The once grand structure was a relic of the town's vibrant past, its paint peeling and windows clouded with dust. Yet, even in its state of decay, Claire could sense the remnants of joy that had once thrived within its walls. The air was charged with a palpable energy, as if the very essence of the house longed to tell its story. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, its hinges groaning in protest as they entered the darkened interior. Inside, the air felt cooler, heavy with the scent of mold and time. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, Claire could make out the remnants of a life once lived. A faded wallpaper adorned with playful patterns, an old piano sitting in the corner, and photographs lining the mantelpiece. Each image captured moments of happiness, families laughing and children playing, their smiles bright against the backdrop of a home that had now fallen into silence. Claire felt a pang of nostalgia, as if she could almost hear the echoes of laughter reverberating through the hallways. "Can you hear that?" one of the guests whispered, a tremor of excitement and fear lacing her voice. Claire strained to listen, and indeed, amidst the stillness, she thought she could discern faint giggles, a sound that seemed to drift from the upper floor. It was a haunting melody, one that beckoned her to explore further. The host, who had followed closely behind, wore a knowing smile, as if he relished the unfolding drama. "Spirits often linger where joy once flourished," he said cryptically. "But be cautious. The past can be both a balm and a curse." With the whispers still guiding her, Claire led the way up the creaking staircase, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. The hallway at the top was dark, but the soft glow of moonlight seeping through a cracked window illuminated a door at the end. Drawn to it, Claire felt an inexplicable connection to whatever lay beyond. She approached the door, her heart racing with both trepidation and anticipation. A gentle push opened the door, and she stepped into a room frozen in time. The chamber was a child's bedroom, its decor whimsical and faded. A small bed covered in a patchwork quilt took center stage, while shelves overflowed with dusty toys and books. Claire's eyes were immediately drawn to a music box perched on the dresser, its delicate craftsmanship catching the moonlight. It was adorned with intricate carvings of dancing figures, and she could almost hear the soft, tinkling melody that had once filled the room with joy. The whispers grew louder, entwining with the echoes of laughter, urging her to wind it up and listen. As Claire approached the music box, the air shifted once again, thickening with an unnameable energy. The moment she wound the key, the familiar tune began to play, filling the room with a haunting sweetness. It was a melody that seemed to dance with the shadows, drawing forth memories that were not her own. As the music played, the whispers transformed, becoming more distinct and clearer, revealing fragments of conversations, snippets of joy and sorrow that had long been buried. "Did you see the fireflies?" a child's voice chimed, accompanied by a burst of laughter. "Let's catch them, just like we did last summer." The words filled Claire with warmth, yet a deep sadness intertwined with the happiness. She could almost see the children racing through the garden, their laughter echoing through the trees. But beneath this nostalgia lay an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that something had disrupted that innocent joy. The voices grew fainter, and Claire's heart ached with the desire to uncover what had happened next. Suddenly, the music box sputtered and stopped, plunging the room into silence once more. Claire felt a shiver run down her spine as the laughter faded, replaced by an ominous weight. "What happened to them?" she whispered, her voice breaking the stillness. The host, leaning against the doorframe, merely smiled, his gaze unfocused, as if he were lost in another time. "The laughter that once filled this home was silenced by an unseen force," he replied. "But echoes of the past still linger, waiting for someone to listen." The group fell into a hushed silence, contemplating the heavy air of the room. Claire turned her attention back to the photographs adorning the walls, now noticing a particular picture that seemed out of place. It was a group of children, their faces bright with joy, standing in front of the very house they now occupied. However, one child stood apart from the rest, her face obscured by shadows. An unsettling feeling washed over Claire as she studied the image more closely. It was as if the girl's presence cast a pall over the laughter surrounding her. "Who is she?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The host stepped forward, examining the photograph with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "That is Anna," he replied, his voice low. "She was once the light of this home, but her laughter was drowned by tragedy. She vanished one fateful night, never to be seen again. The shadows you feel in this house are a testament to her absence." As his words settled in the air, the room grew colder, and the faint whispers transformed into a mournful wail. Claire's heart raced, the reality of Anna's fate crashing down upon her. It was not just a tale of lost joy. It was a story of a life cut short, a soul trapped in the echoes of laughter that once resonated through these walls. The connection between Ravenswood Manor and the town became increasingly apparent. This was not merely a haunted house. It was a repository of lost lives and dreams, each thread weaving a tapestry of despair. Determined to uncover more, Claire gestured to the others to follow her to the next room. Together, they moved into a small attic space adjacent to the bedroom, its entrance concealed behind a narrow door. As they climbed into the cramped quarters, they were greeted by an overwhelming scent of dust and decay. The room was filled with old trunks and boxes, remnants of a life once cherished. Claire felt a sense of urgency building within her. The secrets of this house were begging to be unearthed, the voices demanding to be heard. With a renewed sense of purpose, she began rummaging through the boxes, hoping to find something that could illuminate Anna's fate. As she sifted through faded toys and forgotten trinkets, she stumbled upon a delicate diary, its cover adorned with flowers, now faded and cracked. Carefully, she opened it, revealing pages filled with the scrawled handwriting of a child. The entries spoke of adventures, of friendships and games, but the tone shifted as the pages progressed, growing darker and tinged with fear. As Claire read, a deep sense of foreboding settled over her. Anna's entries reflected a world where laughter had once reigned, but was overshadowed by an impending sense of doom. "Something watches us," one entry read. "I can feel it in the shadows. It makes me afraid to play outside after dark." The final entry was scrawled hastily, the letters almost indecipherable. "I won't let it take me. I will be brave." The weight of Anna's fear settled heavily on Claire's shoulders, intertwining with her own sense of dread. Realizing the urgency of their situation, Claire closed the diary and turned to the group. "We have to find out what happened to Anna. We need to uncover the truth behind the shadows that haunt this town." The host nodded, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. "Yes, Claire. To find peace, one must delve into the darkness. The answers lie buried beneath the surface, waiting for the brave to unearth them." With the gravity of their task settling upon them, Claire felt an electrifying sense of purpose. She understood that the laughter echoing through Ravenswood Manor was not just a remnant of joy. It was a desperate plea from the past, urging her to confront the darkness that had ensnared Anna's spirit. And as they prepared to venture deeper into the town, Claire resolved to shine a light on the secrets that had long been forgotten, determined to uncover the truth hidden in the echoes of laughter. As the night deepened around Ravenswood Manor, Claire felt an unyielding sense of urgency driving her to uncover the truth behind Anna's disappearance. The diary she had discovered weighed heavily in her hands, each page a testament to a childhood filled with innocence that had been abruptly shattered. With the group surrounding her, she turned her gaze toward the door leading back to the hallway. "We need to search the town," Claire asserted, her voice steady despite the trepidation coiling in her stomach. The others nodded, their expressions a mix of fear and determination, fueled by the shared purpose of unraveling the mysteries cloaked in darkness. Exiting the old house, they stepped back into the cool night air, the moon casting a silvery glow on the street before them. The silence of the town was deafening, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a cricket. Each house they passed seemed to loom ominously, holding its secrets tightly within. Claire felt a palpable energy in the air, a whisper of stories waiting to be told, and she resolved to uncover them, even if it meant facing the shadows that lurked at the edges of her consciousness. As they wandered down the deserted streets, Claire led the group toward the center of town, where the remnants of community life still echoed. Once bustling shops stood shuttered, their windows dusty and cracked. A rusted sign swung creakily in the breeze, proclaiming the existence of a general store that had long since succumbed to neglect. Claire felt an ache in her heart, imagining families bustling through the streets, children playing, and laughter echoing off the walls. Yet now, the silence felt heavy, a shroud that stifled any semblance of life. "Where do we start?" one of the guests asked, breaking the stillness. Claire paused, considering their options. "Let's visit the old general store," she suggested. "It might hold clues about Anna and the town's past." The group nodded, and they continued toward the store, the anticipation hanging thick in the air. Upon arriving at the general store, Claire pushed the door open, wincing at the sound of the hinges protesting against years of neglect. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of aged wood and dust. Shelves lined the walls, overflowing with remnants of goods long expired, canned foods, jars of pickled vegetables, and boxes of faded toys. Claire's heart raced as she surveyed the disarray, each item a potential fragment of the town's history waiting to be unearthed. She ventured deeper into the store, her fingers grazing over the shelves. Suddenly, she caught sight of a dusty ledger resting on the counter. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing records of transactions from decades past. As Claire scanned the pages, she discovered names she recognized from her earlier readings. Families tied to the manor, their lives intertwined with the tragedy that had befallen Anna. Her heart quickened. This ledger could provide insight into the relationships and tensions that had defined the town. "Look at this!" Claire exclaimed, drawing the attention of her companions. She pointed to a particular entry dated just days before Anna vanished, a transaction involving the purchase of an unusually large quantity of candles and matches. "What do you think they were for?" she mused, her mind racing with possibilities. It seems odd that someone would buy so many candles at once. The group fell silent, pondering the implications. Was it merely a precaution against darkness, or did it hint at something more sinister? The host stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ledger. "Candles and matches can symbolize many things," he said, his tone laced with intrigue. "But in a town like this, they could also be a signal. A gathering, perhaps? Or a ritual?" The weight of his words hung in the air, and Claire felt a chill creeping up her spine. If Anna's disappearance was connected to a ritual, then the shadows they sought to unravel were far more complex than she had imagined. Determined to dig deeper, Claire flipped through the ledger, searching for more entries that could provide context. She noticed other peculiar transactions, gifts exchanged among families, items seemingly trivial but now resonating with significance. Then she stumbled upon a chilling entry dated the night Anna vanished. 2 women purchased a large quantity of herbs and a book on folk magic. She read aloud, her voice trembling. "This cannot be a coincidence." A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed the information. The implications of the transaction weighed heavily in the air, intertwining with the whispers that had guided Claire thus far. The notion of magic, of rituals steeped in darkness, sent shivers down her spine. It was a reminder that the shadows they were facing were not merely remnants of the past. They were alive, intertwined with the fabric of their present reality. "We need to find out more about these women," Claire suggested, her resolve solidifying. Who were they, and what role did they play in Anna's life? As the group shared glances filled with determination, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. The connection between the town's past and Anna's fate was becoming clearer, and she was determined to unearth the truth before it was too late. Leaving the general store behind, Claire and her companions wandered further into the heart of the town, their minds buzzing with questions. She could feel the weight of the history pressing down on her, an urgency urging her to keep moving forward. They needed to seek out the records, the stories, the whispers that would help them piece together the puzzle of Anna's disappearance and the darkness that had enveloped Ravenswood. Their next destination was the town hall, a decaying structure that had once been a hub of community activity. As they approached, Claire could feel a strange energy emanating from it, a mix of anticipation and dread. What secrets lay within its walls? The path to uncovering Anna's story was fraught with uncertainty, but Claire understood that the only way to dispel the darkness was to confront it head-on, and she was prepared to face whatever awaited her in the shadows of memory. The dilapidated structure of the town hall loomed before Claire and her companions, its facade weathered and weary, much like the town itself. Weeds snaked through the cracks in the pavement, reclaiming the space where life had once flourished. The shutters creaked ominously in the wind, and Claire felt a shiver of anticipation as they approached the entrance. The weight of history pressed down on her, an oppressive reminder of the stories trapped within the walls of this forgotten building. With a deep breath, Claire pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned as if protesting their intrusion. The interior was dimly lit, the faint glow of moonlight spilling through the shattered windows and casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dust motes danced in the air, swirling around them as if the very essence of the building was alive. Claire felt a rush of adrenaline. They were stepping into a place where decisions had been made, where lives had been altered, and where the echoes of the past awaited their discovery. The main chamber was filled with old wooden benches, arranged in a semicircle, facing a raised platform that had once served as the stage for town meetings. Papers lay strewn about, yellowed and tattered, remnants of a time when this hall had been the heart of the community. Claire's fingers brushed against the papers, revealing handwritten notes and announcements that spoke of long-lost events, festivals, elections, and gatherings now forgotten. She felt a pang of nostalgia and sorrow. These were not just records, but fragments of lives that had been intertwined, a web of connection now frayed and torn. "Look over here," one of the guests called, pointing to a large wooden cabinet against the far wall. As they approached, Claire noticed that it was covered in dust, as if it had not been opened in years. With a sense of purpose, she pulled the doors open, revealing shelves filled with old ledgers and documents, some bound tightly while others lay haphazardly, seemingly abandoned. This was the treasure trove she had hoped for, a place where the town's history was preserved, where secrets could be unveiled. Claire carefully began to sift through the ledgers, searching for anything that might shed light on Anna's fate. The handwriting varied, some entries neat and precise, while others appeared rushed and frantic. She noted the names of families, the intertwining lives of those who had inhabited the town, and then her heart raced as she spotted a familiar name, Miriam Halstead. The name was written in bold letters across the top of a page, and Claire felt a jolt of recognition. Miriam was one of the women from the general store, the one who had purchased herbs and a book on folk magic the night Anna vanished. "Here," Claire exclaimed, drawing the attention of her companions. She turned the pages slowly, her eyes scanning the entries. This ledger chronicles the town's events, including the meetings of the town council and significant occurrences. As she continued reading, she stumbled upon a troubling entry dated just a week before Anna disappeared. Miriam Halstead proposed a community gathering, she read aloud. Discussion of traditions and celebrations, focused on the old ways. The significance of the meeting hung heavily in the air. "Old ways?" one of the guests echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. "What do you mean by that?" Claire felt a knot tightening in her stomach as she realized they were likely referencing rituals that had long been abandoned, practices that might have given rise to the town's misfortunes. It seems they were trying to reconnect with their roots, but at what cost? She mused, feeling the weight of the unspoken implications. What if these old ways were linked to Anna's disappearance? The group fell into a tense silence, each person wrestling with the dark possibilities that lay ahead. Claire turned back to the ledger, her heart pounding in her chest. As she flipped through the pages, she uncovered more about the gathering. There are mentions of candle lighting and offerings made to the spirits of the town. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. This can't be a coincidence. Anna's disappearance must be connected to this gathering. As the group digested her words, the air in the room thickened, a tangible tension enveloping them. The shadows seemed to grow deeper, wrapping around them like a cloak, as if the town hall itself was reacting to the revelations being unearthed. "We need to find out more about this gathering," Claire insisted. "If they were trying to summon something, we have to know what it was. And what happened to Anna?" With a newfound determination, Claire led the group deeper into the town hall, searching for more clues. The back room was cluttered with boxes and files, remnants of old records that had been neglected over the years. As they rifled through the contents, Claire stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound book. The title embossed on the cover read "The Lore of Ravenswood," and her heart raced with excitement. This could be the key to understanding the town's history and the events that had unfolded. Claire opened the book, its pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches that depicted the town's folklore and traditions. The illustrations danced with life, figures in ceremonial garb, depictions of the spirits revered by the townsfolk, and images of rituals that blurred the line between reverence and fear. As she studied the pages, she felt the presence of something ancient watching over her, an energy that both intrigued and terrified her. One particular passage caught her eye, detailing a ritual held at the summer solstice, a celebration of light that had slowly morphed into something darker. The townsfolk once gathered to honor the spirits of the land, Claire read aloud, her voice steady. But over time, the rituals became corrupted by fear, and whispers of sacrifice began to surface. The weight of the words settled heavily on her, the realization dawning that Anna's disappearance might have been linked to these twisted traditions. "This is it," Claire breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. The old ways they spoke of were likely not just harmless traditions. They involved something sinister. The implications hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst, and the group exchanged worried glances. If Anna was connected to this gathering, we need to find out what role she played and what happened to her that night. Just then, a sudden noise echoed through the hall. A sharp crack followed by the sound of scuffling footsteps outside. The group froze, eyes darting toward the door. "What was that?" one of the guests whispered, fear lacing their voice. Claire's heart raced as she exchanged glances with the others. The feeling of being watched, of the shadows pressing in around them, intensified. They weren't alone in their quest for the truth. Something else was lingering in the darkness, and it was all too aware of their presence. "Stay close," Claire instructed, her voice firm. The energy in the room shifted as they prepared to confront whatever had intruded upon their search. Together, they crept toward the door, the whispers of the past swirling around them. Whatever lay beyond this threshold could hold the answers they desperately sought, or plunge them deeper into the darkness that had already ensnared Anna. As they reached for the doorknob, the air crackled with tension, an electric pulse that thrummed in their veins. Claire took a deep breath, bracing herself for what awaited them outside the town hall. The shadows that had once felt merely like echoes of the past now loomed larger than life, an embodiment of the town's darkest secrets. And as they stepped into the unknown, Claire was determined to unearth the truth behind the shadows of memory, no matter the cost. With a swift turn of the doorknob, Claire pushed open the door, and a rush of cold night air swept into the town hall, mingling with the musty scent of aged wood and dust. The shadows danced outside as the moonlight filtered through the trees, casting elongated silhouettes that flickered ominously. The group stepped cautiously onto the porch, their senses heightened, acutely aware of the palpable tension in the air. Whatever had stirred them from their search was now lurking just beyond the threshold, waiting for them to make their next move. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Claire's heart raced, a primal instinct urging her to turn back. But she forced herself to take a deep breath, to confront the darkness that had already claimed Anna. "We have to investigate," she urged, her voice steady despite the unease settling in her stomach. The others nodded, their resolve solidifying in the face of uncertainty. As they stepped off the porch and onto the cracked pavement, Claire felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding wash over her. The night felt alive, as if the very essence of Ravenswood was watching them. She glanced at her companions, their expressions a mix of apprehension and determination, and she knew they were all in this together. They had become a part of the narrative that was unfolding, a story woven into the very fabric of the town. The sound of scuffling grew louder, echoing through the stillness, guiding them toward the source of the disturbance. Claire led the way down the dimly lit street, her heart pounding in rhythm with her steps. As they approached the edge of the town square, the flickering light of a lantern caught her eye. Its warm glow seemed a beacon amidst the encroaching shadows, and she felt compelled to investigate further. "Look over there," one of the guests whispered, pointing toward a cluster of trees at the edge of the square. "It looks like someone is standing by the lantern." Claire squinted into the darkness, straining to make out the figure. A shiver of dread coursed through her as she recognized the outline of a woman dressed in flowing robes, her face obscured by a deep hood. The sight sent a chill down Claire's spine. Was this Miriam Halstead, the woman who had purchased the herbs and the book? "Should we approach?" another guest asked, their voice trembling slightly. Claire hesitated, the urge to confront the figure battling with an instinctual need to retreat. "We need to know what's happening," she replied firmly. "Whatever this is, it's connected to Anna." The group shared wary glances but ultimately agreed, stepping cautiously toward the flickering light. As they drew closer, the figure turned, and Claire's breath hitched in her throat. The woman's eyes glinted in the dim light, and she raised her hands as if to signal them to stop. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice smooth yet haunting. "This is not a place for the living." A shiver ran through Claire. The tone carried an eerie resonance that echoed in the stillness of the night. "Who are you?" Claire demanded, summoning every ounce of courage. "What do you know about Anna?" The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, and she stepped closer to the lantern, illuminating her face, which appeared ageless yet weathered by the burdens of time. "Anna was part of a story much larger than herself," she replied cryptically, her voice laced with wisdom. "The past and the present are intertwined, and there are truths you have yet to uncover." The group stood frozen, entranced by her words. Claire felt an inexplicable connection to the woman. It was as if she were a gatekeeper to the knowledge they sought. "Please," Claire implored, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need to know what happened to Anna." She vanished the night of the gathering. The woman's expression shifted, a shadow of sorrow flickering across her features. The gathering was not what it seemed, she warned, her voice lowering to a whisper. "A darkness awakened that night, one that demands a price." "Price," one of the guests echoed, their voice barely above a whisper. The woman nodded solemnly. "The old ways require balance, a sacrifice to appease the spirits." Claire's heart raced, the weight of her words crashing over her like a wave. "You're saying Anna was sacrificed?" she asked incredulously. The woman's eyes softened, a hint of regret flashing across her face. "Not all who gather are aware of the consequences. Some come seeking power, others redemption. Anna was caught in the crossfire of it all." As the implication sank in, Claire felt the world around her spin. The community they had long trusted had harbored a dark secret, one that had cost Anna her life. "But why?" Claire pressed, fighting against the swell of despair rising in her chest. "Why would they do this?" The woman took a deep breath, her gaze piercing through the shadows. Fear breeds desperation. They sought to reclaim what was lost, but in doing so, they awakened something far more sinister. The revelation hung heavily in the air, the weight of the truth wrapping around Claire like a suffocating shroud. She had come to Ravenswood seeking answers, but now the answers only deepened the mystery. "How can we stop this?" Claire implored, her voice shaking. "We can't let it happen again." The woman's gaze hardened, the resolve in her eyes unyielding. "To stop it, you must confront the darkness within yourself and seek the light. It begins with understanding the past, and only then can you hope to change the future." Claire felt a flicker of hope amidst the overwhelming darkness. "Tell us what we need to do," she urged. The woman paused, scanning the group with a knowing look. "You must return to the manor," she instructed. "There, you will find the answers hidden in plain sight." The truth of Anna's fate lies within those walls. Before Claire could respond, the woman stepped back, disappearing into the shadows as suddenly as she had appeared. The lantern flickered ominously before extinguishing completely, plunging them into darkness. The night felt heavier, suffocating, yet Claire's resolve burned brightly within her. They had been given a task, a path to follow, and she was determined to see it through. "Let's go back to the manor," Claire said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in her heart. The group nodded, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. Together, they retraced their steps through the dimly lit town, the echoes of the woman's warnings resonating in their minds. The darkness was closing in, but Claire felt an unyielding spark of hope guiding her forward. The truth awaited them, hidden within the very walls that had held Anna captive, and she was ready to confront whatever awaited them in the shadows of Ravenswood. The walk back to Ravenswood Manor felt longer than before, each step echoing with the weight of revelation. Claire and her companions moved in a tight-knit group, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass that blanketed the path. The moon hung low in the sky, shrouded in clouds that mirrored the uncertainty swirling within Claire's mind. Each shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, whispering secrets of the past that clawed at her consciousness. As they approached the manor, Claire felt a familiar mix of dread and anticipation. The house loomed before them, its dark silhouette cutting sharply against the night sky. She could see the glint of the broken windows, reflecting the moonlight like hollow eyes staring back at them. "This place feels alive," one of her companions murmured, their voice trembling slightly. "Like it's watching us?" Claire nodded, feeling the truth of those words resonate deep within her. The manor had witnessed so much pain, and now it was beckoning them to uncover its darkest secrets. Pushing the heavy front door open, Claire was immediately met by the musty scent of decay. The air inside felt thick, stifling her breath as if the walls themselves were holding their secrets close. They stepped into the grand foyer, where remnants of the past were strewn about like forgotten memories. Dust particles floated in the shafts of moonlight that broke through the cracks in the walls, and the old wooden floor creaked beneath their weight. Claire shivered, acutely aware of the history that permeated the air. "Where do we start?" one of the guests asked, breaking the heavy silence. Claire's eyes scanned the room, her heart racing as she considered their options. "We need to find Anna's room," she said finally. "If the truth is hidden anywhere, it's likely there." The group nodded in agreement, and they began to make their way up the winding staircase, the air growing cooler with each step. The corridor on the second floor was dimly lit, the faint glow of moonlight barely illuminating their path. As they moved cautiously down the hall, Claire's heart thudded loudly in her chest, echoing her anxiety. Each door they passed was a barrier to a world unknown, holding fragments of stories that had long been silenced. Finally, they reached a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. Claire pushed the door open, revealing a room that had been untouched by time. It was a sanctuary of memories. Soft pastel colors adorned the walls, and a delicate canopy draped over the four-poster bed, now faded and yellowed. Claire stepped inside, her eyes drinking in the details. There were books stacked haphazardly on the bedside table, remnants of Anna's life that lingered like whispers of a forgotten past. Claire felt a rush of emotion. This was where Anna had dreamed, laughed, and perhaps cried. As she explored the room, her fingers brushed against the spine of one particular book, a journal that seemed to shimmer in the low light. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing pages filled with Anna's neat handwriting. The entries chronicled her hopes, fears, and dreams, painted against the backdrop of the town's traditions. The last entry sent a chill through Claire's bones. "I fear the darkness that has come over Ravenswood. I feel the weight of the past pressing down on me, and I worry for the gathering tomorrow. Will we be able to control what we have awakened?" Claire's heart raced as she read the words, each line resonating with a truth that was both haunting and profound. "This is it," she said, turning to her companions, whose eyes were wide with fascination. Anna knew something was wrong. She sensed the darkness long before it manifested. The group gathered closer, reading the entries over Claire's shoulder, their expressions a mixture of empathy and dread. Suddenly, Claire's attention was drawn to an envelope tucked between the pages. She carefully pulled it out, her fingers trembling. The envelope bore no return address, only Anna's name written in her delicate script. With a deep breath, Claire opened it, revealing a letter that seemed to pulse with energy. The letter read, "To whomever finds this, I implore you to heed my warning. The gathering on the solstice is not what it appears. There are forces at play that we cannot control, and I fear that I am a pawn in a game much larger than myself. If you are reading this, please do not let my fate befall you. The darkness demands a sacrifice, and I fear I may be chosen. Seek the truth, and do not trust those who speak of the old ways." Anna, the weight of her words sank deep into Claire's chest, a foreboding realization dawning on her. Anna was trying to warn us, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She knew she was in danger, and she tried to protect others. The revelation hit the group like a tidal wave, the implications of Anna's letter resonating deeply in their minds. "We have to stop this gathering," one of the guests declared, determination burning in their eyes. If Anna was right, we're running out of time. Claire nodded, her resolve solidifying. They had been given a glimpse into the darkness that haunted Ravenswood, and they could no longer stand idly by. "We need to gather evidence, proof of what has happened here, and what is about to happen again." As they left Anna's room, Claire felt the weight of responsibility resting squarely on her shoulders. She knew that the truth would not come easily, but they were determined to confront the darkness head-on. They ventured back to the main hall, where Claire recalled the old chest they had spotted earlier in their exploration. It could hold clues to the rituals and the town's hidden history. "Let's check the chest," Claire suggested, her heart racing with anticipation. They quickly found the weathered chest in the corner of the room, its lid heavy with dust. With a collective effort, they managed to pry it open, revealing a trove of forgotten items. Candles, herbs, and strange trinkets that whispered of old rituals and ancient practices. Among the items, a tattered book caught Claire's eye, its cover embossed with symbols she recognized from Anna's journal. Flipping through its pages, Claire felt her pulse quicken. The book contained detailed descriptions of the rituals performed during the solstice, including incantations and offerings meant to appease the spirits of the land. But what struck her most was the final entry, hastily written, that echoed Anna's warning: "Beware the sacrifice. The darkness hungers for the innocent, and once it is sated, it shall not rest until it is fed again." The implications of the text gripped Claire with a cold dread, and she exchanged worried glances with her companions. They had stumbled upon a legacy of darkness that transcended generations, a cycle that demanded a reckoning. "We have to break the cycle," Claire declared, her voice steady. "We have to find a way to confront this darkness before it claims another victim." With a renewed sense of purpose, the group began to devise a plan, drawing on the knowledge they had unearthed. They would need to confront the townsfolk, to gather evidence and rally those who remained unaware of the impending danger. But first, they had to find a way to protect themselves, to shield against the darkness that had already taken root in Ravenswood. As they continued their discussions, the shadows in the manor seemed to pulse, swirling around them like a tempest. Claire felt a surge of resolve amidst the chaos, a determination to reclaim the light from the darkness that had long overshadowed her family's legacy. The battle for Ravenswood had begun, and she was ready to fight. Suddenly, Claire's attention was drawn to an envelope tucked between the pages. She carefully pulled it out, her fingers trembling. The envelope bore no return address, only Anna's name written in her delicate script. With a deep breath, Claire opened it, revealing a letter that seemed to pulse with energy. The letter read, "To whomever finds this, I implore you to heed my warning. The gathering on the solstice is not what it appears. There are forces at play that we cannot control, and I fear that I am a pawn in a game much larger than myself. If you are reading this, please do not let my fate befall you. The darkness demands a sacrifice, and I fear I may be chosen. Seek the truth, and do not trust those who speak of the old ways. Anna, the weight of her words sank deep into Claire's chest, a foreboding realization dawning on her. Anna was trying to warn us, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She knew she was in danger, and she tried to protect others. The revelation hit the group like a tidal wave, the implications of Anna's letter resonating deeply in their minds. "We have to stop this gathering," one of the guests declared, determination burning in their eyes. If Anna was right, we're running out of time. Claire nodded, her resolve solidifying. They had been given a glimpse into the darkness that haunted Ravenswood, and they could no longer stand idly by. "We need to gather evidence, proof of what has happened here, and what is about to happen again." As they left Anna's room, Claire felt the weight of responsibility resting squarely on her shoulders. She knew that the truth would not come easily, but they were determined to confront the darkness head-on. They ventured back to the main hall, where Claire recalled the old chest they had spotted earlier in their exploration. It could hold clues to the rituals and the town's hidden history. "Let's check the chest," Claire suggested, her heart racing with anticipation. They quickly found the weathered chest in the corner of the room, its lid heavy with dust. With a collective effort, they managed to pry it open, revealing a trove of forgotten items. Candles, herbs, and strange trinkets that whispered of old rituals and ancient practices. Among the items, a tattered book caught Claire's eye, its cover embossed with symbols she recognized from Anna's journal. Flipping through its pages, Claire felt her pulse quicken. The book contained detailed descriptions of the rituals performed during the solstice, including incantations and offerings meant to appease the spirits of the land. But what struck her most was the final entry, hastily written, that echoed Anna's warning: "Beware the sacrifice. The darkness hungers for the innocent, and once it is sated, it shall not rest until it is fed again." The implications of the text gripped Claire with a cold dread, and she exchanged worried glances with her companions. They had stumbled upon a legacy of darkness that transcended generations, a cycle that demanded a reckoning. "We have to break the cycle," Claire declared, her voice steady. "We have to find a way to confront this darkness before it claims another victim." With a renewed sense of purpose, the group began to devise a plan, drawing on the knowledge they had unearthed. They would need to confront the townsfolk, to gather evidence, and rally those who remained unaware of the impending danger. But first, they had to find a way to protect themselves, to shield against the darkness that had already taken root in Ravenswood. As they continued their discussions, the shadows in the manor seemed to pulse, swirling around them like a tempest. Claire felt a surge of resolve amidst the chaos, a determination to reclaim the light from the darkness that had long overshadowed her family's legacy. The battle for Ravenswood had begun, and she was ready to fight. Claire's heart raced as she realized the implications of what she was uncovering. It wasn't just Anna who had fallen victim to the darkness. It was a cycle of pain that had spanned generations. The town's refusal to confront its past had given birth to a malevolent force that demanded sacrifice, and now it was calling out for another offering. Determined to bring this evidence back to her friends, Claire carefully gathered the clippings, placing them in her bag with a sense of urgency. With time slipping away, Claire hurried back to the manor, her mind racing with thoughts of how to present their findings to the townsfolk. She envisioned holding a meeting, perhaps in the town square, where they could share their discoveries and rally support against the impending gathering. But as she approached the manor, a sense of unease washed over her. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the wind carried a whisper that felt all too familiar. Once inside, she found her friends already gathered, their faces a mix of anxiety and excitement. "You won't believe what we found," Claire exclaimed, revealing the newspaper clippings. The group huddled around as she shared the chilling accounts of the past, the connections to Anna, and the sinister pattern that had emerged. As she spoke, she noticed the flicker of fear in their eyes, but also a growing resolve. They were all in this together, united by the shared goal of breaking the cycle that had haunted their town for far too long. After Claire finished, one of her friends, Tom, spoke up. "I found something too," he said, pulling out a notebook filled with sketches and notes. He explained that during his conversations with older townsfolk, he had heard tales of a hidden chamber beneath the town hall, a place where rituals had been conducted in secrecy. If we could find it, he continued, maybe we could discover what really goes on during the gatherings. The idea sent a jolt of energy through the group. A hidden chamber could hold the answers they desperately sought. We should check it out, Claire urged, her mind racing with possibilities. If we can find evidence of the rituals being conducted, it will give us the leverage we need to confront the townsfolk. The group agreed, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. With a plan in place, they set out toward the town hall, each step echoing with the weight of their mission. The air felt charged with anticipation, the chill of the night wrapping around them like a shroud. As they approached the old building, Claire glanced back at the manor, its windows dark and foreboding, a reminder of the darkness they were up against. She felt a flicker of doubt, but pushed it aside, focusing on the task ahead. Once inside the town hall, they made their way to the basement, guided by Tom's notes. The narrow stairway creaked ominously under their weight, and Claire felt her heart race with each step. The darkness enveloped them, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. When they reached the bottom, a heavy wooden door stood before them, its surface scarred with age. Claire exchanged a glance with her companions, each of them nodding in silent agreement. With a deep breath, Claire pushed the door open, revealing a chamber filled with shadows. As they stepped inside, the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Flickering candles lined the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced along the stone surface. In the center of the room lay an altar covered in strange symbols and offerings, remnants of rituals long forgotten. As they explored the chamber, Claire felt a wave of dread wash over her. They had stumbled upon a sacred space, one that held the echoes of the past. The weight of history bore down on them, but amidst the darkness, Claire felt a spark of hope. They were on the verge of uncovering the truth that could save their town. With evidence in hand and determination fueling their spirits, they were ready to confront the darkness that had haunted Ravenswood for generations. The gathering storm was approaching, but they would not face it alone. Together, they would fight to reclaim the light. The air was thick with tension as Claire and her companions emerged from the hidden chamber, clutching their newfound evidence like a lifeline. The gravity of their discovery weighed heavily on them, the echoes of past rituals reverberating in their minds. They had stumbled upon the heart of Ravenswood's darkest secrets, a chamber where lives had been sacrificed to appease an insatiable darkness. But now, armed with knowledge and determination, they were ready to confront the townsfolk and break the cycle of despair. As they made their way back to the manor, the moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow on the path ahead. Claire's heart raced as they approached the town square, the site where the annual gathering was set to take place. Lanterns flickered like restless spirits, illuminating the faces of those who had come together in anticipation of the event. Claire felt a mix of apprehension and urgency. They needed to act quickly before the darkness could take hold once more. Gathering in the center of the square, Claire took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Everyone," she called out, her voice steady despite the rising anxiety in her chest. The crowd turned toward her, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. "We have something important to share, something that affects us all." The murmurs of the townsfolk grew louder, their skepticism palpable. She knew convincing them would be no easy feat. "We've discovered evidence of the rituals that have been conducted here in Ravenswood for generations," Claire continued, her voice rising above the crowd's chatter. "These gatherings are not what they seem. They are shrouded in darkness, and they demand a sacrifice to sustain the balance." She could see the disbelief etched on their faces, some crossing their arms defensively, while others shifted uncomfortably. Anna was not the first victim, nor will she be the last if we don't take a stand now. A ripple of unease ran through the crowd, and Claire pressed on. "We found a hidden chamber beneath the town hall, filled with remnants of past rituals, offering altars, symbols of sacrifice, and more. Anna tried to warn us. She knew something was wrong. We can't let her death be in vain." Her heart raced as she scanned the faces of the townsfolk, searching for signs of understanding. We have a chance to break this cycle, to protect ourselves and our future. A voice from the back of the crowd called out, laced with skepticism. And what proof do you have? You expect us to believe in these ghost stories? What's next? You'll say there's a monster in the woods? Claire's stomach twisted with frustration, but she refused to back down. This isn't a ghost story, she replied, her voice firm. This is our reality. We have newspaper clippings that detail disappearances linked to these gatherings. Tangible evidence of the darkness that's been ignored for too long. With a nod from her friends, Claire pulled out the stack of newspaper clippings and held them up for all to see. The dim lantern light flickered across the faded articles, illuminating headlines that told stories of vanished young women and unexplained phenomena. The crowd fell silent, their expressions shifting from disbelief to contemplation as they took in the weight of her words. Claire could sense the tide beginning to turn, but doubt still lingered in the air. Look at these names, she urged, pointing to the articles. These are real people with real families, people who have suffered because we've turned a blind eye to the truth. We have to confront this darkness together. We can't let fear dictate our lives any longer. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but Claire knew that many were still hesitant. The deeply ingrained traditions and fears of the past held them back. Just then, an elderly woman stepped forward, her face etched with lines of wisdom and sorrow. I remember the stories, she said, her voice trembling. When I was a girl, we were warned not to stray too far from the gathering. There were whispers of sacrifices made to keep the town safe. The crowd listened intently as she spoke, the air thick with the weight of her memories. But we brushed them aside, convinced it was just folklore, a way to scare children into obedience. Perhaps we were wrong. Encouraged by her words, Claire seized the opportunity. We have a chance to change the narrative. We can stand together and demand that the gathering be halted. Let's expose the truth and ensure no more lives are lost. The crowd began to stir, some exchanging glances of concern, while others nodded in agreement. The tension in the air shifted, and Claire could feel the flicker of hope igniting within the hearts of those who had once been skeptical. As the townsfolk discussed their options, Claire spotted the town mayor standing at the edge of the crowd, a skeptical expression on his face. He had always been a staunch defender of tradition, often dismissing any challenges to the status quo. Stepping forward, Claire addressed him directly. Mayor, we need your support. You have the power to influence the gathering. If you speak out against it, others will listen. The mayor regarded her with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. And what do you propose we do? Abandon our traditions? These gatherings have been part of Ravenswood for generations. Claire could hear the hesitance in his voice, the conflict between his duty to uphold tradition and the growing fear of the unknown. It's time to create new traditions, Claire replied, her voice unwavering. We can honor the past while protecting our future. We can't let fear control us any longer. Let's hold a community meeting to discuss the evidence, share our stories, and decide as a town how to move forward. Together, we can rewrite our narrative. The words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise all at once. The mayor's expression softened as he considered her plea. You're asking us to face a reality we've long avoided. But perhaps it's time we confront the truth about what has been happening in our town. The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement, the tension dissipating as a sense of unity began to take root. Claire felt a swell of hope surge within her. They were on the cusp of a pivotal moment. As the townsfolk continued to discuss their options, Claire felt the shadows of Ravenswood begin to lift. They had taken the first step toward breaking the cycle of fear and sacrifice. The confrontation had been daunting, but it had sparked a flame of determination in the hearts of those who once believed they were powerless. Together, they would reclaim their town, expose the darkness, and forge a path toward a brighter future. The gathering storm was not yet over, but with each step they took, Claire felt the strength of unity emboldening them. They would stand together against the darkness, confront the truths of their past, and fight to ensure that Ravenswood would not be defined by fear, but by the courage to change. The confrontation had begun, and they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The dawn broke over Ravenswood with a tentative light, casting long shadows across the town as Claire and her companions prepared for the community meeting. The air was thick with anticipation and uncertainty, a palpable mix of hope and fear swirling among the townsfolk who gathered in the town hall. The stakes had never been higher. They were about to confront a tradition steeped in darkness and challenge the very foundation upon which their community had been built. Claire felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach, but the urgency of their mission propelled her forward. As the townsfolk filtered into the hall, Claire and her friends set up their presentation, carefully laying out the evidence they had gathered. The newspaper clippings were prominently displayed on a large board, their faded headlines a stark reminder of the lives lost to the darkness. Claire's heart raced as she glanced around the room, noting the familiar faces filled with apprehension. She had spent countless nights thinking about this moment, envisioning how to approach the delicate task of unraveling years of tradition. The mayor opened the meeting, his voice steady yet tinged with unease. "Thank you all for coming today. We are here to address some serious concerns regarding the upcoming summer solstice gathering." His gaze swept over the crowd, and Claire felt the weight of his authority. "It has come to my attention that some of our young people have been gathering evidence of the past gatherings, and it's imperative we consider their findings." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. With a nod from the mayor, Claire stepped forward, feeling the collective eyes of the townsfolk upon her. "Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear but laced with tension. "We have uncovered disturbing evidence that links these gatherings to a series of disappearances and dark rituals. We believe it's time to confront these truths and consider the implications for our future." She gestured toward the display board, her hand shaking slightly as she revealed the clippings. As Claire spoke, she could see some members of the crowd squirming in their seats, grappling with the weight of her words. These aren't just stories or folklore. They're real accounts of lives lost in the shadows of tradition, she emphasized, her heart racing. "We cannot continue to ignore what has happened in our town. We owe it to those who have suffered to seek justice." The tension in the room escalated as her words resonated with some, while others remained unconvinced. An older man, one of the town's longtime residents, stood up, his voice shaky. "But these rituals have been part of our community for generations. Are you suggesting we just abandon our heritage? What will that mean for us?" His question hung heavy in the air, highlighting the deep-seated fears that surrounded any challenge to tradition. Claire understood his perspective. Abandoning the past felt like stepping into a void where the familiar was replaced by the unknown. "No one is asking us to abandon our heritage," Claire replied, her voice firm yet compassionate. "What we are proposing is an evolution of that heritage, one that acknowledges the past while protecting our future. We can honor those who came before us by ensuring that their legacy does not continue to bring suffering. Change is frightening, but sometimes it is necessary for growth." The tension in the room shifted slightly, and Claire sensed that some were beginning to reconsider their positions. Another voice rose from the crowd, this time a younger woman who had lost her sister during one of the gatherings years ago. "I've spent years trying to make sense of what happened to my sister. The rituals were never spoken of openly, but we all knew they existed. If we keep pretending everything is fine, more people will suffer. We have to confront the truth." Her passionate plea echoed through the hall, prompting a murmur of agreement from those who understood the pain of loss. Encouraged by the woman's bravery, Claire pressed on. "We can create new traditions that bring us together instead of tearing us apart. We have an opportunity to forge a path of healing, one that embraces transparency and community support. Imagine a gathering where we celebrate life, not one shrouded in fear and sacrifice." The crowd began to shift, their expressions softening as they contemplated a different future. As the meeting progressed, Claire shared more about their discoveries in the hidden chamber, detailing the remnants of past rituals and the symbols they had found. Each revelation felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders, empowering her to speak more freely. She could see the crowd beginning to engage, some even taking notes, their interest peaked. "We don't have to live in the shadow of fear any longer. Together, we can redefine what it means to be part of this community. However, the shadows of doubt still lingered. An older woman, a respected member of the community, stood up, her voice trembling. But what if you're wrong? What if this is just a phase, a moment of rebellion? Traditions are there for a reason. They keep us grounded. The doubt in her voice resonated deeply, and Claire recognized that it would take more than just evidence to change minds. It would require a profound shift in perspective, a re-examination of what it meant to be part of Ravenswood. Change is always met with resistance, Claire replied, feeling the weight of her own conviction. But we must ask ourselves, at what cost? If we continue down this path, how many more lives will be lost? How long can we ignore the suffering that has persisted for generations? We owe it to ourselves and to those who have suffered to confront this darkness together. Her words hung in the air, and Claire could see the impact they were having on the crowd. The mayor interjected, "Perhaps it's time we take a vote. If the community wishes to pursue a different path, we will need to discuss the logistics of stopping the upcoming gathering. But it's imperative that we approach this with caution." The room fell silent as everyone considered his proposal, a tension-filled moment as they weighed their options. Finally, the murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, the collective realization that change was not only possible, but necessary. As the vote was called, Claire felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. They had taken the first steps toward confronting the past, but the future still hung in the balance. Each hand raised in support felt like a tiny victory, a testament to the courage of a community willing to challenge the status quo. They were ready to confront the darkness, to demand accountability for the pain endured by their predecessors. In the end, the majority voted to halt the upcoming gathering, signaling a new chapter for Ravenswood. Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew that this was just the beginning. The shadows of doubt might still linger, but together, they had forged a path toward a brighter future. As the meeting concluded, Claire glanced at her friends, their faces filled with determination. They had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious, ready to reshape their town and reclaim their narrative. The fight was far from over, but as Claire left the town hall, she felt the weight of the past beginning to lift. The dawn of a new era was on the horizon, and with each step forward, they were moving closer to breaking free from the chains of fear that had bound them for so long. Together, they would illuminate the shadows of Ravenswood, crafting a legacy built on hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that change was possible. In the days following the pivotal community meeting, a new sense of hope began to blossom in Ravenswood. Claire and her companions found themselves at the forefront of a grassroots movement aimed at transforming the town's annual summer solstice gathering into a celebration of life and community rather than a veil of darkness. However, beneath this emerging optimism lurked the remnants of fear and doubt, shadows that could not be easily dispelled. As plans were made and excitement grew, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of the past still held significant sway over the present. One evening, Claire gathered with her friends, Jenna, Marcus, and Leo, in the backyard of her home. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the somber feelings that had plagued the town for generations. They spread out the old maps of Ravenswood, alongside the newspaper clippings they had collected. "We need to be vigilant," Claire said, tracing the outline of the town with her finger. "The old ways may not die easily. We have to ensure that whatever we create is a genuine reflection of what we stand for." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "We should incorporate stories from those who lost loved ones to the darkness. It will be a way to honor their memory," Claire agreed, knowing that the community needed to understand the gravity of the past in order to forge a meaningful future. It was essential to provide a platform for those who had suffered to share their stories, to voice the pain that had been buried beneath years of silence. They needed to confront the wounds openly, allowing healing to begin. As the days turned into weeks, the town began to mobilize. Flyers were posted in local shops, and social media buzzed with excitement about the upcoming event, a celebration that would be marked by remembrance, unity, and hope. Claire and her friends organized meetings, inviting townsfolk to share their experiences and offer input on how to honor the lost. They envisioned an event that would encompass art, music, and storytelling, a true tapestry of their community woven together by resilience and shared memory. Yet, as the plans took shape, the undercurrents of resistance grew stronger. Rumors circulated about the so-called dissidents trying to undermine the traditions that had defined Ravenswood for so long. Claire sensed that some townspeople were still clinging to the old ways, unwilling to let go of the past that had shaped their identities. Whispers echoed in the corners of shops and between houses, some fearing that abandoning the summer solstice gathering would bring about an even darker fate. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. She had read enough about the town's history to know that change was often met with fierce opposition. One afternoon, while organizing materials for the celebration, Claire received a message from Leo. "Meet me at the old church. I found something you need to see." The urgency in his text made her heart race. The old church had been abandoned for years, left to the whims of nature. It was rumored to be haunted, a relic of the town's past that many avoided. What could be so important, she wondered, a mix of dread and curiosity tugging at her. Upon arriving at the church, Claire found Leo pacing outside, his brow furrowed in concern. "I uncovered something in the church basement," he said, leading her inside. The musty air was thick with the scent of decay, and shadows clung to the corners of the room as they descended into the basement. With a flick of his flashlight, Leo revealed a series of dusty boxes. "Look," he said, pointing to a box that appeared to contain old church records. As they rifled through the papers, Claire felt her heart pound. Among the documents were handwritten notes detailing strange rituals performed by the church decades ago, some of which echoed the practices they had uncovered in the hidden chamber beneath the town hall. "This explains a lot," Claire said, flipping through the pages. "These records show a direct link between the church and the town's past rituals. It's not just the gathering. It's been ingrained in the very foundation of Ravenswood." She felt a mixture of anger and fear coursing through her veins. It was as if the walls of the town were whispering secrets she had never wanted to hear. Leo glanced at her, his expression grave. If these records were to come to light, it could change everything. The townsfolk who cling to the past might feel threatened. He was right. The revelations could ignite a firestorm of opposition. Yet Claire understood that they had to confront these truths head-on. Ignoring the past would only prolong the cycle of fear that had gripped Ravenswood for far too long. "Then we have to share this," Claire said, resolve hardening in her voice. "We must present this information at the celebration. It's vital that the community understands the full extent of what's happened here." Leo nodded, knowing that the truth, however painful, was necessary for healing. They spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging the documents, determined to create a presentation that would honor those lost while also shedding light on the darker aspects of their history. As the day of the celebration drew closer, Claire felt a mounting pressure. The excitement of the townsfolk was palpable, but so was the undercurrent of fear. Each day, she noticed more people whispering and casting wary glances in her direction. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, as if the shadows of the past were rising to challenge their efforts. Claire found herself questioning whether they could truly change the narrative that had long held Ravenswood in its grip. On the evening before the celebration, Claire and her friends gathered for a final planning session at her home. The weight of their mission pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. "What if they don't accept the truth?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they turn against us?" Claire felt her heart ache at the uncertainty, but she knew they had come too far to turn back now. "We can't let fear dictate our actions," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremors of doubt. "We're doing this for those who have suffered, for those who can't speak for themselves. We owe it to them to push forward." With each passing moment, the anticipation built, both thrilling and terrifying. The night was charged with electricity, and as Claire lay in bed, she felt a tumult of emotions swirling within her. Tomorrow would be a turning point, a chance to illuminate the shadows and reclaim Ravenswood's story. But what if the past rose to confront them? What if the townsfolk rejected the truth, clinging instead to the familiar comfort of old traditions? As she drifted off to sleep, Claire could hear the echoes of Ravenswood calling to her, a blend of sorrow and hope intertwined. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she was determined to face whatever lay in the shadows. Tomorrow, they would shine a light on the past, and perhaps in doing so, they would finally begin to break free from the chains that had bound their town for far too long. The day of the celebration dawned bright and clear, an uncharacteristic warmth enveloping Ravenswood as if nature itself were eager to witness the momentous occasion. Claire awoke with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The preparations had consumed her thoughts for weeks, and now, the culmination of their efforts was finally at hand. She glanced at the clock and realized time was slipping away faster than anticipated. After a quick breakfast, she dashed to her computer, reviewing the final presentation they had meticulously crafted over the past days. Each slide was a blend of memories, art, and hard truths, an invitation to the community to confront their past and envision a different future. The town square had transformed overnight. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and booths adorned with flowers offered a warm welcome to attendees. Local artists had contributed their works, and the air buzzed with anticipation as the townsfolk began to gather. Claire felt a flutter of nerves as she took in the sight, smiling faces mingling with the laughter of children, unaware of the heavy truths about to be unveiled. Would they accept what was coming, or would the whispers of doubt drown out the voice of hope? As Claire helped set up the presentation area, she spotted Jenna and Marcus bringing over refreshments. They were visibly excited, but Claire noticed a hint of anxiety lurking beneath their smiles. "Do you think they'll really listen?" Jenna asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "What if we're just stirring up trouble?" Claire felt a pang of doubt in response. "All we can do is share our truth. We've worked too hard to turn back now." Her voice was firm, but inside, she grappled with the fear of rejection that loomed larger as the moment approached. At noon, the celebration officially began, and Claire took a deep breath, stepping up to the makeshift stage. The crowd quieted as she approached, their eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "This is not just a celebration. It's an opportunity to reflect on our past and to honor those we've lost. We can no longer afford to let fear dictate our lives." She felt a swell of courage rise within her, as if the very spirit of Ravenswood was urging her onward. As Claire delved into the presentation, she began to share the stories of the past, the disappearances, the rituals, and the hidden truths that had long haunted the town. The newspaper clippings, now projected on a large screen behind her, revealed faces that had once been vibrant and full of life. The air in the square grew thick with tension as Claire recounted the lives that had been lost to the shadows of tradition. She noticed a few attendees shifting uncomfortably, the reality of the past becoming too palpable to ignore. Just as Claire was about to reveal the documents from the church, a voice called out from the crowd. "You're just trying to stir up trouble. We've always had these traditions for a reason." It was an older man, a respected member of the community who had long been an advocate for maintaining the old ways. His outburst sent ripples of tension through the audience. Claire's heart raced, but she knew she had to remain composed. "I'm not here to stir trouble. I'm here to advocate for change, for healing," she replied, her voice firm but measured. "Tradition doesn't have to come at the cost of our lives." Another voice joined the fray. "And what if you're wrong? What if we abandon our heritage and things get worse?" This time, it was a woman who had lost her son years ago during one of the summer solstice gatherings. Claire felt a deep pang of sympathy for her pain. "I understand your fear, and I don't want to diminish the importance of our heritage. But can we truly honor those we've lost by ignoring the truth? We can create new traditions that celebrate life instead of perpetuating cycles of suffering." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, and Claire sensed a turning point in the discussion. "I want to share something important with all of you," she continued, steeling herself. She gestured to the large screen, where images of the church documents came into view. These records reveal that the very foundation of our town's traditions has been steeped in darkness. It is not just the summer solstice gatherings. It has been a pervasive cycle that has claimed too many lives. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. The atmosphere shifted as Claire shared the stories of the rituals, their origins rooted in fear and secrecy. She noticed some members of the crowd exchanging glances, their expressions morphing from skepticism to contemplation. "We can't change the past," Claire said softly, "but we can reshape our future. We can honor those lost by choosing to create something beautiful and life-affirming." The vulnerability in her voice resonated with many, and Claire saw the beginnings of a connection forming within the crowd, a collective recognition of shared pain and the possibility for change. Suddenly, a young woman stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I lost my brother during the last gathering," she said, her voice cracking. "He was just a child, and I never understood why these rituals had to happen. I've felt lost ever since." The weight of her grief hung in the air, prompting others to join in, sharing their stories of loss and sorrow. One by one, they stepped forward, unveiling the deep wounds that had been concealed for far too long. Claire felt a swell of emotion in the crowd, a sense of unity emerging from shared pain and a yearning for healing. As the final speaker concluded, Claire stepped forward once more. "Today, we have the opportunity to honor those we've lost by transforming our celebration into something that uplifts rather than binds us. Let us create new traditions, ones that celebrate life, unity, and remembrance. Together, we can forge a path toward a brighter future for Ravenswood." The air buzzed with energy, and Claire could see a flicker of hope igniting in the eyes of those who had previously been skeptical. With that, Claire led the crowd in a moment of silence, inviting them to reflect on the lives lost and the new legacy they wished to create together. The stillness enveloped them, a collective breath held in honor of the past and in anticipation of the future. When she finally lifted her head, she saw many tears but also newfound determination. As the silence broke, spontaneous applause erupted, echoing through the square. "Let's do this together," someone shouted, and soon the crowd erupted into cheers, a chorus of voices rising in support of change. In that moment, Claire felt a rush of triumph mixed with disbelief. They had faced the shadows, and in doing so, they had illuminated a path forward. The celebration had transformed into a powerful testament to resilience and community. Together, they had chosen to break free from the chains of tradition, turning toward a future that embraced truth and healing. As the festivities continued, Claire joined her friends, overwhelmed with emotion. They had confronted the darkness head-on, and the energy in the square was electric with possibility. The future of Ravenswood was no longer defined by fear, but by a shared commitment to honor the past while paving a brighter way ahead. With the promise of change hanging in the air, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just rewriting the narrative. They were reclaiming their story, united by the belief that together, they could face whatever shadows lay ahead. In the days following the celebration, Ravenswood began to transform in ways that Claire had never anticipated. The air was charged with newfound energy, and the town buzzed with discussions about creating new traditions that embraced life, community, and remembrance. Yet, amid the enthusiasm, a disquieting undercurrent of uncertainty persisted. Claire could feel it lurking just beneath the surface, a pervasive doubt that seemed to follow her like a shadow. While many had rallied around the cause, there remained a faction of townsfolk who were deeply resistant to change, clinging to the old ways with an almost desperate fervor. Despite the momentum of the celebration, Claire soon noticed that some community members were growing increasingly vocal in their opposition. At first, it was subtle, muttering in the grocery store, sideways glances at town meetings. But gradually, the dissent began to surface in more organized ways. Flyers began to appear on community boards, urging residents to protect Ravenswood's traditions and warning against the dangers of abandoning their heritage. These flyers often featured ominous images of the past rituals, insinuating that the loss of the old ways would lead to catastrophe. Claire felt her stomach churn as she read the messages. It was as if the shadows of Ravenswood were reaching out once more, trying to entangle the community in fear. The unease deepened when Claire received an anonymous message one evening while preparing for a meeting with her friends. It was a simple text that sent chills down her spine. "You've awakened the darkness. You can't change what's meant to be." The cryptic nature of the message unsettled her, igniting her fears that the very forces they had aimed to confront were stirring once more. Could the community truly be in danger? What if the darkness they thought they had defeated was merely biding its time, waiting for the right moment to strike? Despite the looming sense of dread, Claire was determined to push forward. She called a meeting with Jenna, Marcus, and Leo, seeking counsel and camaraderie. They gathered in her living room, the air thick with tension. "We can't let this fear take hold," Claire insisted, her voice steady yet strained. "We've made progress, and we can't go back now. We need to find a way to show everyone that change doesn't mean abandoning our heritage. It means evolving and healing." Jenna, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "But what if they really do believe that we're inviting disaster? I'm worried about how far they might go to protect the old ways." Marcus nodded in agreement, adding, "We need a counter-campaign. Something that illustrates the benefits of our new traditions and emphasizes that we're not turning our backs on the past. We're simply reshaping it." Leo, who had been studying the flyers, chimed in. "I've noticed that most of the dissenters are the same people who have been influential in the community for decades. We need to engage with them directly. If we can show them that we're not enemies, we might diffuse some of their fear." Claire felt a flicker of hope at Leo's suggestion. Direct engagement might be the key to bridging the divide. They spent the next several days drafting a counter-campaign that aimed to reach out to the townsfolk resistant to change. Claire suggested organizing community discussions in neutral spaces, emphasizing dialogue over division. "Let's invite people to share their stories and perspectives. It's essential that everyone feels heard," she proposed, feeling a surge of determination. Each of them took on different roles. Jenna focused on logistics, Marcus organized outreach, and Leo took charge of creating materials that illustrated their vision for a unified community. As they rolled out their plan, Claire felt a growing sense of urgency. They scheduled the discussions for the following week, hoping to spark constructive conversations that could quell the fears taking root in the community. However, as the day of the first discussion approached, the shadows of doubt continued to loom larger. The anonymous messages persisted, becoming more aggressive. "You're going to regret this," one read. Another ominous note simply stated, "The past never forgets." The weight of these threats gnawed at Claire's resolve, instilling a fear that she struggled to shake. When the day finally arrived, Claire felt a knot in her stomach as she entered the community center. The room was set up with chairs arranged in a circle, a format designed to foster open dialogue. She glanced around the room, noticing a mix of familiar faces and strangers, some there to engage and others seemingly ready to challenge the very foundation of their initiative. The tension was palpable as she stood before the gathering, her heart racing. "Thank you all for coming," she began, trying to project confidence despite the storm brewing within. "This is an opportunity for us to come together and share our thoughts, concerns, and ideas about how we can move forward as a community." As Claire facilitated the discussion, she noticed the immediate resistance from a small group of attendees. They were vocal and passionate, expressing their fears about losing their heritage and what they believed to be the essential fabric of Ravenswood. Claire listened intently, validating their concerns while also gently guiding the conversation toward the potential for growth. "We can honor our past while also choosing to forge new paths," she emphasized. Yet, as the conversation progressed, it became evident that no amount of rational argument would assuage their fears. The dissenters grew increasingly agitated, and tensions escalated when one man stood up, accusing Claire and her friends of trying to erase history. "You think you can just change everything and make it better? You're playing with forces you don't understand," he shouted, his voice reverberating in the room. Claire felt her heart race, but she stood her ground. "We're not here to erase history. We're here to acknowledge it and to create a future that honors all voices," including those lost to the darkness. Just as the meeting began to spiral into chaos, Leo stepped in, urging the group to take a moment of silence. "Let's remember why we're here," he said, his calm demeanor cutting through the tension. "We're all affected by what has happened in the past. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who has suffered." The moment of stillness allowed for reflection, and as Claire glanced around the room, she noticed a few attendees softening, their expressions shifting from hostility to contemplation. The conversation continued, but with a renewed focus. Many began to share their own stories of loss and fear, revealing the depth of their pain. Claire listened intently, feeling a sense of connection forming amid the disagreements. Slowly, they began to recognize the common ground they shared, a desire for healing and hope, despite their different views on how to achieve it. "We all want Ravenswood to thrive," Jenna noted, her voice breaking through the rising tide of empathy. "Let's focus on how we can work together to create something beautiful from our shared history." As the discussion concluded, Claire felt a sense of cautious optimism. While not everyone had been swayed, some had expressed a willingness to continue the dialogue. It was a small victory, but it felt significant nonetheless. "We're not done yet," Claire said to her friends as they gathered afterward. "We'll need to keep reaching out, finding ways to engage those who still resist." The night was heavy with uncertainty, but Claire was resolved to remain steadfast in their mission. The shadows of doubt may have lingered, but they would not dictate the course of Ravenswood's future. Claire understood that true change required patience, persistence, and a commitment to facing the darkness together. As the evening came to a close, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. She glanced at the darkening sky, aware that the echoes of the past were still present, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Yet in that moment, she also felt a flicker of hope, knowing that even the deepest shadows could not extinguish the light of unity and understanding they were striving to create. In the weeks that followed the community discussions, Claire felt a strange blend of hope and apprehension swirling within her. The conversations sparked by her initiative had illuminated pathways toward understanding, but they had also awakened something sinister lurking in the shadows of Ravenswood. The faction of dissenters had not disappeared. Rather, they had become more entrenched in their beliefs, forming an underground movement that thrived on fear and nostalgia. Anonymous flyers continued to circulate, and Claire began to receive ominous warnings that were increasingly aggressive. Each note served as a chilling reminder that the shadows were still very much present, waiting to exploit the town's vulnerability. One night, Claire found herself unable to sleep, the weight of anxiety pressing down on her chest like an unwelcome blanket. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the community discussions in her mind. Had she really made an impact? Or had she merely stirred the pot, causing divisions to deepen rather than heal? The incessant rustling of leaves outside her window added to her unease, transforming into a cacophony of whispers that seemed to echo her doubts. She turned on her bedside lamp, hoping the warm light would dispel the creeping shadows in her thoughts. The glow was comforting, yet it did little to quiet the restless demons in her mind. Determined to confront her fears, Claire decided to take a walk around the town the following morning. The sun was bright, casting a golden hue over Ravenswood, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. The town was bustling with activity, children playing, neighbors chatting, and artists displaying their latest creations. But beneath the cheerful facade, Claire sensed an undercurrent of tension. Groups of people whispered in corners, and she noticed familiar faces exchanging furtive glances when she passed by. It was clear that the town was divided, and the whispers of dissent were growing louder. As Claire approached the town square, she was surprised to see a makeshift gathering forming around the old fountain. Curiosity piqued. She joined the crowd, which had gathered around a speaker, a man Claire recognized from the earlier discussions. He stood on a wooden crate, passionately addressing the crowd about the need to protect Ravenswood from the forces of change. His words dripped with emotion, painting a picture of a town under siege. "We cannot let outsiders dictate our future. The old ways kept us safe for generations." The crowd erupted in applause, and Claire felt a cold knot in her stomach. The man's rhetoric resonated with many, and Claire could see the emotions swirling in the crowd: fear, anger, and an overwhelming sense of nostalgia. She realized that the echoes of the past were proving to be more powerful than she had anticipated. It was not just about tradition, it was about identity. The townsfolk were grappling with the idea that their very sense of self was under threat. The more Claire listened, the more she understood that the battle was not simply about the past or the future. It was about the soul of Ravenswood itself. Feeling a surge of responsibility, Claire decided to speak up. As she stepped forward, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, a mix of curiosity and hostility. "I understand the fear you're feeling," she began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "But change doesn't have to mean abandoning our roots. We can honor our history while also embracing a new way forward." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, but the dissenters quickly countered, their voices rising above hers. "You're naive. You think you can erase what makes us who we are?" Someone shouted from the back, igniting a flurry of jeers. The confrontation quickly escalated, and Claire felt the heat of anger from the crowd pressing in on her. She took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I'm not asking anyone to forget their past. I'm asking us to create a future where everyone can belong, where we honor the memories of those we've lost without letting their deaths define us." But her words fell on deaf ears. The man on the crate raised his arms, rallying the crowd. "Who is she to tell us what to do? We've survived for this long because we've respected our traditions." The situation spiraled further out of control, and Claire realized that the shadows were no longer just an abstract fear. They had manifested into a palpable tension in the air. She felt trapped, caught between a sea of faces reflecting anger and confusion. "We need to talk, not fight," she cried, desperate to reclaim the conversation. But her plea only deepened the discord. The man continued to fan the flames, and Claire knew she had to step back, regroup, and reassess. The last thing she wanted was for her message of unity to become a rallying cry for division. Retreating to her home, Claire's heart raced with frustration and fear. She felt the weight of the town's history pressing down on her, and the echoes of the past grew louder. That night, she lay awake, consumed by doubt. Would they ever be able to come together? As she stared at the ceiling, her phone buzzed with a new message, a familiar cryptic text that chilled her to the bone. "You've made your choice. Now you'll face the consequences." The darkness was no longer a distant threat. It was closing in, whispering tales of retribution and despair. Determined to confront this challenge head-on, Claire decided to reach out to those in the community who had shown support during the discussions. The next morning, she gathered Jenna, Marcus, and Leo, sharing her concerns about the growing unrest. "We can't let them drown us out," she urged. "We need to mobilize those who want to move forward and remind the community that change is possible." Together, they crafted a plan to host a series of workshops, spaces for open dialogue where people could express their fears and explore ways to blend old traditions with new ideas. As they worked to organize the workshops, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each step forward was a small victory against the shadows that threatened to engulf them. However, in the back of her mind, a lingering fear remained. What if the dissenters grew more aggressive in their opposition? What if they resorted to actions that could endanger not just the new traditions, but the very lives of those who sought change? Despite her resolve, the whispers of doubt continued to creep in, creating a tension between hope and fear. The first workshop was scheduled for the following weekend, and Claire felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. As the day approached, she could sense the energy in Ravenswood shifting, oscillating between anxiety and anticipation. Would the community show up? Would they engage in meaningful dialogue? Or would the shadows once again cast their pall over the conversation? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but Claire knew one thing. They could not afford to give in to fear. They had to fight for the light, even when the darkness threatened to swallow them whole. With the flicker of hope still alive in her heart, she prepared for the battle ahead, knowing that the true test of Ravenswood's spirit was yet to come. As the day of the first workshop approached, the air in Ravenswood grew thick with tension. Claire felt it in the pit of her stomach. a palpable unease that seemed to resonate with every passing moment. The whispers that had once merely echoed in her mind now reverberated throughout the town. It was as if the very walls of Ravenswood were imbued with the weight of history, bearing witness to the struggle unfolding between tradition and change. The stakes had risen dramatically, and Claire was acutely aware that the future of the town hung in the balance. In the days leading up to the workshop, Claire and her friends worked tirelessly to promote the event. Flyers were posted around town, and they utilized social media to spread the word. They framed the workshop as an opportunity for community healing, a chance for residents to express their fears and hopes in a safe environment. Yet, with every announcement, Claire could feel the shadows closing in. The dissenters had ramped up their campaign against change, holding clandestine meetings and plotting their next moves. The whispers of protecting Ravenswood turned into chants that seemed to resonate with those who felt threatened by the shifting tide. On the morning of the workshop, Claire awoke with a mix of excitement and dread. She had chosen to hold the event at the community center, a neutral ground where people could feel safe to share their thoughts. However, as she prepared for the day, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. The sun was hidden behind a shroud of gray clouds, casting an ominous hue over the town. She gathered her notes, determined to remain focused on the goal, fostering open dialogue and understanding. As she left her house, the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her, but she steeled herself for the challenge ahead. When Claire arrived at the community center, she was relieved to see a small crowd already gathering. Friends and supporters were mingling, exchanging greetings, and showing enthusiasm for the initiative. However, her heart sank as she noticed a few familiar faces lurking at the edges of the gathering, dissenters who had come to challenge the very essence of what they were trying to build. The division was stark. On one side stood those who sought unity and healing, while on the other lingered those who clung to fear and the past. The air crackled with tension, and Claire could feel it thickening as the time for the workshop approached. Jenna and Marcus arrived shortly after, bringing a sense of camaraderie that momentarily lifted Claire's spirits. Together, they set up the chairs in a circle, creating an inviting atmosphere for discussion. Leo helped to arrange a table with refreshments, offering a small gesture of hospitality in hopes of breaking the ice. But as they prepared, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She turned to see a small group of dissenters huddled together, whispering amongst themselves with furtive glances cast her way. A knot formed in her stomach as she recognized the leader of the opposition, the man who had rallied the crowd at the fountain. As the workshop began, Claire opened the floor with a few introductory remarks, encouraging everyone to share their stories and feelings. "We're here to listen to each other, to learn from one another," she said, her voice steady despite the trepidation bubbling beneath the surface. She shared her own journey, recounting the loss she had felt and the determination that had driven her to seek change for the community. As she spoke, she could see some of the attendees nodding in agreement, their expressions softening. For a moment, it seemed that the atmosphere might shift toward understanding. However, as the first participant began to share, the dissenters grew restless. One of them stood up abruptly, interrupting the speaker. "You talk about loss, but what about the loss of our identity?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the room. "This is our town, and we can't let it be taken from us." Claire felt a wave of frustration wash over her, but she reminded herself to remain calm. "No one is trying to take anything away," she responded, her voice measured. "We're here to find a way to honor our past while embracing a future that includes everyone." The tension escalated as more dissenters began to voice their frustrations, drowning out the voices of those who genuinely wanted to engage in meaningful dialogue. Claire could feel the workshop spiraling out of control, and she struggled to maintain order. As emotions flared and accusations were hurled, Claire caught a glimpse of despair in Jenna's eyes. It was a reminder that they were not just fighting for change. They were battling for the very soul of their community. In that moment, Claire realized that the division ran deeper than she had initially perceived. Just when it seemed that chaos would reign, Leo stepped in, his voice calm yet firm. "Let's take a moment to breathe," he suggested, inviting everyone to pause and collect their thoughts. The crowd hesitated, but gradually they fell silent, allowing the tension to dissipate, if only for a moment. "We all care about Ravenswood," he continued. "We all want to see it thrive. Let's use this space to understand each other, not to attack. We owe it to ourselves and to this community." His words hung in the air, a fragile olive branch that encouraged a glimmer of hope. With the atmosphere temporarily diffused, Claire seized the opportunity to guide the conversation back to its original intent. "Let's talk about what makes Ravenswood special to each of us," she proposed. "What are the traditions that you hold dear? How can we integrate those into a vision for the future?" Slowly, some participants began to share their cherished memories and experiences. The stories flowed, weaving a tapestry of connection and shared history that reminded everyone present of their common bonds. As the discussion evolved, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. She could see the flicker of understanding in the eyes of those who had previously been hostile. Gradually, the dissenters began to engage in the conversation, expressing their concerns in a more constructive manner. They articulated their fears about losing their identities, their heritage, and the very essence of what made Ravenswood unique. Claire listened attentively, validating their feelings while gently encouraging a broader perspective. "Change doesn't erase our history. It can enrich it," she reminded them. However, as the workshop progressed, a shadow loomed just outside the community center. Unbeknownst to Claire and the attendees, a larger group of dissenters had gathered, emboldened by the earlier confrontation. They had come to disrupt the workshop, armed with signs and chants aimed at silencing the conversation. Claire could feel the anxiety building within the room as whispers of discontent echoed outside. The atmosphere shifted once more, a sense of foreboding creeping in like an unwelcome guest. Just as the discussion reached a crucial point, the doors of the community center burst open. A wave of dissenters flooded in, their voices drowning out the conversation. "You can't change us. You're the ones who need to go," they shouted, brandishing their signs. Claire felt her heart race, the weight of fear pressing down on her. This was no longer just a disagreement. It was a full-blown assault on the very essence of what they had been trying to build. The shadows had not just whispered. They had taken form, threatening to tear apart the fragile unity that had begun to blossom. In that moment of chaos, Claire knew she had to act quickly. "Everyone, let's stay calm," she shouted over the din, her voice straining against the cacophony. "We're all here for the same reason. We need to listen to each other, not fight." But her pleas were drowned out by the chants of dissenters who refused to back down. Fear surged through the crowd, and Claire realized that the darkness was not just an external force. It was growing within the hearts of the very people she sought to unite. As the two factions clashed, Claire's mind raced, grappling with the question of how to navigate this turbulent storm. Would they be able to salvage the dialogue they had fought so hard to establish? Or would the shadows of doubt and fear consume Ravenswood entirely? The answer hung precariously in the air, suspended between hope and despair, as Claire prepared to face the battle ahead. The struggle for the soul of Ravenswood had reached its boiling point, and the outcome remained uncertain. One thing was clear: they were on the precipice of a reckoning, and only time would reveal whether the light of unity could pierce through the enveloping darkness. The chaos within the community center reached a fever pitch as Claire faced the dissenters, their shouts echoing off the walls. The atmosphere was electric, charged with fear and anger. Claire's heart raced, but she refused to back down. She could see the fear in the eyes of her supporters. They were just as frightened as she was. This was not merely a debate about the future of Ravenswood. It was a confrontation between opposing ideologies, a collision of dreams and nightmares. Claire stood firm, determined to transform this moment of chaos into an opportunity for resolution. "Everyone, please," Claire shouted, her voice cutting through the clamor. "We're not enemies here. We're neighbors. We all want what's best for Ravenswood." Her words seemed to momentarily freeze the crowd, a fleeting silence washing over the room as participants paused to consider the truth in her statement. For a moment, it felt like a collective breath was held, a shared recognition of the reality that they were, indeed, all part of the same community, bound by a history that was as rich as it was complex. But that silence was quickly shattered as a man from the dissenting group stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. "You think you could just come in here and dictate how we should live?" he spat. "You don't understand the sacrifices that built this town. You're the outsider here." Claire felt a rush of frustration at the accusation, but she knew she had to respond thoughtfully. "I'm not trying to dictate anything," she replied, her voice steady. "I want to listen to understand, but we can't move forward if we don't first acknowledge the pain we all carry." As the dissenters began to shout over her again, Jenna stepped in, her presence commanding and resolute. "This is not just about one perspective," she asserted, addressing both sides. "It's about coming together as a community. We can't afford to let fear dictate our actions. We owe it to ourselves to try to find common ground." Her passionate plea resonated with some, igniting a flicker of hope that perhaps, amidst the shouting, understanding could still emerge. Claire seized the moment. "Let's take a step back," she suggested, trying to redirect the energy in the room. "Instead of shouting over each other, let's have representatives from both sides share their thoughts. One from the dissenters and one from those who support change." The idea of a structured dialogue seemed to intrigue the crowd, but the dissenters hesitated. The leader of the dissenting faction, a man Claire recognized as Mark, exchanged glances with his followers, his face a mask of contemplation. After a tense moment, Mark stepped forward, a mix of defiance and curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Fine, I'll speak," he declared, a subtle challenge in his tone. "But I won't sugarcoat anything. You want to know why we're fighting so hard? It's because we see our home slipping away, and we can't let that happen." Claire nodded, sensing the gravity of his words. It was an opportunity to engage in a dialogue that could potentially bridge the divide. Mark's voice was passionate as he spoke of his childhood in Ravenswood, sharing stories of the traditions that had been passed down through generations. He described the sense of community that came from gathering for annual festivals and honoring those who had built the town. "These aren't just events, they're our lifeblood," he asserted. "If we start changing everything, what happens to our identity? What do we have left?" His words resonated deeply with many in the crowd, a reminder of the importance of heritage and belonging. When Mark finished, Claire felt the weight of his message. "I hear you, Mark," she responded, "and your fears are valid. But change doesn't mean erasing the past. It means adapting, evolving. We can honor our traditions while allowing room for growth." The murmurs of agreement that rippled through the crowd encouraged Claire, giving her hope that the dialogue might shift toward understanding. Yet, the dissenters remained guarded, their resolve unbroken. Next, a young woman named Sarah from Claire's side stood up, her voice trembling but resolute. "I've lived here my whole life, and I love this town just as much as you do," she began. "But I also see the struggles we face. Young people are leaving because they feel stifled by tradition. We can't keep ignoring the changes that are happening around us. If we want Ravenswood to thrive, we need to embrace new ideas." As she spoke, the crowd seemed to listen more intently, her words resonating with those who felt similarly trapped between the old and the new. Sarah's honesty broke down some of the barriers, and Claire felt a glimmer of hope flickering to life within her. The conversation began to shift, transforming from a cacophony of shouting into a more thoughtful exchange of ideas. One by one, individuals from both sides began to share their stories, revealing their vulnerabilities and the deep connections they had to the land they called home. It was a slow process, but Claire could see the walls beginning to crumble, even if just a little. However, just as the dialogue seemed to gain momentum, a sudden crash echoed through the room. A group of dissenters at the back, fueled by frustration and feeling unheard, began to tear down the flyers promoting the workshop. "This is a waste of time," one shouted, throwing the paper to the floor. "You'll never change our minds." The act felt like a dagger to Claire's heart, a painful reminder of how far they still had to go. The energy in the room shifted once more, and the atmosphere grew heavy with uncertainty. In that moment, Claire recognized the urgent need to confront the dissenters head-on. "Please, let's not do this," she pleaded, her voice rising above the clamor. "We've come so far already. We're not enemies. We're neighbors. If we can't respect each other here, how can we expect to move forward as a community?" Her words hung in the air, suspended between hope and despair, challenging everyone present to choose a path, one that could either lead to unity or division. After a tense moment of silence, the crowd began to murmur, some people reflecting on the passionate exchanges that had taken place. Claire felt a flicker of hope as she watched the dissenters pause, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Mark, who had initially led the charge against her, took a deep breath. I didn't come here to destroy everything," he said slowly, his voice softer now. "I just want to protect what we have." His vulnerability opened a door, creating space for others to follow suit. The rest of the dissenters began to lower their signs, the intensity of their anger fading as they listened to Mark's candid admission. Gradually, others started to express their fears without the need for aggression. Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her, a growing realization that perhaps, amidst the chaos, a bridge could be built. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was clear that the true battle lay not in destroying each other, but in finding a way to coexist. As the workshop continued, Claire and her friends exchanged glances of cautious optimism. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The road ahead would require patience, empathy, and a willingness to listen, qualities that had been overshadowed by anger and fear. Yet in that moment, in the heart of the storm, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had taken the first steps toward healing, and although the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, they would face it together, united by their shared love for Ravenswood. As the workshop drew to a close, Claire could sense a shift in the energy of the room. The cacophony of anger had transformed into a chorus of understanding, each voice contributing to a harmonious blend of ideas. The shadows that had threatened to engulf them were still present, but for the first time, there was a collective determination to confront them. Claire knew that the battle for Ravenswood's soul was far from over, but in this moment, they had illuminated a path forward, a path where hope could thrive amidst the whispers of the past. In the days following the workshop, the atmosphere in Ravenswood shifted significantly. The community buzzed with conversations about the event and the exchanges that had taken place. Though the dust had settled, Claire felt an undercurrent of tension still rippling through the town, a reminder that while they had made progress, the battle for unity was far from over. The momentary truce they had forged was fragile, and the specter of dissent loomed large, threatening to shatter the hard-won connections that had begun to form. Claire and her friends, Jenna, Marcus, and Leo, took it upon themselves to keep the momentum alive. They organized follow-up gatherings to maintain the dialogue, hoping to encourage further understanding and healing. Their efforts, however, were met with mixed reactions. Some community members embraced the new direction, eager to engage in discussions about the future. Others remained resistant, still clinging to their fears of change. This dichotomy weighed heavily on Claire, who felt the burden of responsibility growing each day. She knew that she had to keep pushing forward, but with each step, the specter of failure whispered in her ear. At one such gathering held at the local cafe, Claire noticed an uneasy tension brewing in the air. Dissenters had begun to infiltrate their meetings, seeking to disrupt the dialogue and undermine the progress made. Mark, who had initially voiced his concerns during the workshop, seemed caught in the middle, wrestling with his own convictions. Claire couldn't help but feel frustrated. She had hoped that their initial confrontation could be a stepping stone to deeper understanding, but instead, it felt like a tightrope walk over a chasm of unresolved conflicts. As the group settled down with coffee and pastries, Claire took the opportunity to address the growing unrest. "I know there are still strong feelings about what happened during the workshop," she began, looking directly at Mark. "But if we want to move forward, we need to acknowledge our fears and find ways to address them together." Her words were met with a mix of nods and wary glances, and Claire felt a sense of urgency to keep the dialogue open. Mark hesitated, but eventually raised his hand, a signal that he wanted to speak. "I want to say that I understand the need for change," he started, his voice steady, but tinged with vulnerability. But I also fear losing what makes Ravenswood, well, Ravenswood. It's not just about traditions, it's about identity. We can't forget that. The room fell silent as people absorbed his words, the echoes of shared experiences resonating deeply. Claire recognized that his willingness to engage in conversation was a crucial step toward healing. The discussion began to unfold organically, with participants sharing their personal stories about why they felt connected to Ravenswood's traditions. A woman named Clara spoke about her late grandmother, who had raised her with tales of the town's history. "Those stories shaped who I am," she shared, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want my children to know where they come from, even as we look to the future." Others chimed in, recounting their own cherished memories and the fear of losing those connections in the face of change. As the meeting progressed, it became evident that the participants were beginning to understand one another's perspectives. The barriers that had once divided them were gradually eroding, replaced by empathy and shared humanity. Claire felt a surge of hope as she listened to the stories being shared, realizing that they were not so different after all. They all loved Ravenswood. They all desired to see it flourish. However, the conversation was still not without its challenges. A voice from the back interjected, "But how do we reconcile that with the changes happening around us? It feels like we're being forced to adapt without any consideration for our traditions." Claire recognized the genuine fear behind the question, and she took a deep breath, preparing to respond. "Change is scary, I know," she said, "but it doesn't mean we have to abandon our roots. We can find ways to integrate our history with new ideas. It's about evolution, not erasure." Mark nodded, echoing Claire's sentiments. "Maybe we could create community events that celebrate both our traditions and new initiatives," he suggested, his tone softer than before. "We could invite everyone to share what they love about Ravenswood, fostering a sense of belonging." The room buzzed with approval, and Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was a breakthrough, a tangible step toward bridging the gap between the old and the new. As they continued discussing ideas, the atmosphere shifted further. Creativity flourished in the air, ideas bubbling to the surface as participants suggested ways to bring the community together. Someone proposed a festival that blended the town's rich history with contemporary art and culture, while another suggested storytelling nights where residents could share their tales and experiences. Laughter erupted as people exchanged playful ideas, the tension of earlier conversations giving way to a spirit of collaboration. However, just as the atmosphere lightened, the door swung open, and a few more dissenters entered, their expressions hardened. Claire's heart sank as she recognized them from previous confrontations. They looked determined, their arms crossed and expressions set in defiance. Claire knew this could disrupt the fragile progress they had made. "Here we go again," she thought, steeling herself for another confrontation. Mark immediately noticed their presence and stood up, visibly tense. "We're trying to have a conversation here," he said, his voice steady. "Can you just listen for a moment?" The dissenters exchanged glances, but did not respond. Claire felt the room tense again, the hope that had blossomed moments before now threatened by the specter of conflict. But Claire was not ready to back down. "You're welcome to join us," she said, her voice clear and firm. "We're discussing ways to bring our community together, and your voices are just as important." Her statement hung in the air, a challenge that compelled the dissenters to reconsider their approach. After a moment of hesitation, one of them stepped forward, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "What do you mean by bringing us together?" he asked, clearly skeptical. Claire took a deep breath, sensing an opportunity. "We want to create events that honor our past while embracing new ideas. This is about finding common ground and working together to ensure Ravenswood thrives," she explained. The dissenters exchanged glances, and Claire could see the gears turning in their minds. "But how can we be sure you won't just erase our history?" another dissenting voice questioned, skepticism still lingering. "It's about trust," Claire replied earnestly. "I know that trust has been broken in the past, but we're here to rebuild it. We want to ensure that everyone's voices are heard, that traditions are honored alongside new innovations." She could feel the eyes of the room on her, sensing a collective hope that perhaps this could lead to a turning point. The silence that followed was heavy with contemplation, the tension still palpable, but slowly giving way to possibility. As the dissenters absorbed her words, Claire sensed a shift in their demeanor. The hardened expressions began to soften, a flicker of vulnerability appearing in their eyes. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental in the grand scheme of their ongoing battle. The conversation resumed, weaving together threads of hope, frustration, and determination, a tapestry reflecting the complexity of their shared identity as Ravenswood residents. By the end of the evening, Claire left the cafe with her heart full. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that there was a genuine chance for reconciliation. The confrontation that had once threatened to divide them had instead become a catalyst for dialogue, encouraging everyone to grapple with the difficult questions of identity, heritage, and the future. As Claire lay in bed that night, she reflected on the evening's events. The whispers of uncertainty still echoed in her mind, but now they were accompanied by the laughter of new ideas and the warmth of shared stories. They had taken a significant step toward healing, but Claire knew that this was just the beginning. The true test would come when the shadows of the past threatened to creep back in, and they would have to confront them head-on. For now, however, she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that together, they had sparked the light of possibility in the heart of Ravenswood. The weeks that followed the gathering at the cafe were filled with both promise and uncertainty. Claire's determination to foster unity within Ravenswood gained momentum, and as the days turned into weeks, she found herself swept up in a whirlwind of planning and organizing. The air buzzed with excitement as ideas transformed into tangible events, with the upcoming festival, the first of its kind, drawing near. It was designed to celebrate both the town's rich history and the innovative spirit that Claire believed was essential for its future. However, as Claire immersed herself in preparations, she could not shake the feeling that the undercurrents of dissent still simmered beneath the surface. While many embraced the festival's vision, a segment of the community remained skeptical. Meetings with the dissenters revealed their lingering concerns about the authenticity of the event. They feared it might be a facade, a way to gloss over the complexities of change without genuinely addressing their apprehensions. Claire understood their fears, but struggled to articulate a response that would truly reassure them. Determined to honor their worries, Claire arranged for a series of open discussions leading up to the festival. These meetings aimed to provide a platform where all voices could be heard, a space for everyone to express their hopes and fears. As she prepared for the first session, Claire felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would people be willing to engage in dialogue again? Or would the festering wounds of distrust resurface? The first discussion was set to take place in the town hall, a neutral ground that had long served as a gathering place for community events. Claire arrived early, setting up chairs in a circular arrangement to promote inclusivity. As she adjusted the last chair, she couldn't help but notice the echoes of past meetings held in that very room. The memories flooded back, shouts, tears, and moments of fleeting hope. With each memory, she felt the weight of the past pressing against her, a reminder of the fragile state of their community. When the evening arrived, residents trickled into the hall, some with apprehension etched across their faces. Claire welcomed them warmly, her heart racing as she glanced around the room. She recognized familiar faces from the dissenting faction and felt a surge of hope when Mark entered, flanked by a couple of his supporters. Claire knew that this was a critical moment. If they could engage in a constructive conversation now, it could set the tone for the festival and beyond. Once everyone settled, Claire stood at the front of the room, her voice steady yet inviting. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, looking directly at Mark and the dissenters. "This is a space for open dialogue, where we can share our thoughts and feelings about the upcoming festival. It's important that we address any concerns you may have. We want this event to truly reflect who we are as a community." Her words hung in the air, an invitation wrapped in sincerity. Mark was the first to speak, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate this effort, Claire," he said, his tone measured. But I'm worried that the festival will become just a way for you to showcase your vision of the town without considering our heritage. It feels like you're trying to erase who we are." Claire could sense the vulnerability behind his words, and she responded with empathy. "I understand why you feel that way, Mark. My intention is to celebrate our history alongside new ideas, not to erase anything. We all have a stake in Ravenswood's future, and I want to hear what we can do to ensure everyone feels represented." As the discussion unfolded, other community members began to voice their concerns. A woman named Grace shared her anxiety about the changes to the town's landscape and how new developments could threaten the small businesses that had long been the backbone of the community. "We don't want to lose our identity to progress," she asserted, her voice quivering with emotion. "We need to make sure that our small-town charm remains intact." Claire listened intently, understanding that the fears expressed were rooted in love for their community. "I hear you, Grace," she replied, her heart heavy with empathy. "What if we create spaces at the festival for local businesses to showcase their products? This way, we can support them while also highlighting the new things coming into town." The suggestion sparked a glimmer of interest in the room, and Claire sensed a shift in the energy. As discussions continued, an underlying theme emerged, a desire for collaboration rather than conflict. Participants began brainstorming ways to incorporate both the past and the future into the festival. Ideas flowed freely as community members bounced suggestions off one another, generating excitement. There was talk of traditional food stalls run by local families, storytelling sessions featuring tales of Ravenswood's history, and art displays showcasing the work of local artists inspired by their surroundings. Yet, even as hope blossomed, Claire remained vigilant. She recognized that these discussions were only the first step. They would need to address deeper issues to truly heal the rifts within the community. She proposed establishing a committee comprised of both supporters and dissenters, tasked with overseeing the festival's planning and ensuring all voices were represented. The suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval, an indication that collaboration was beginning to take root. As the meeting drew to a close, Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had engaged in meaningful dialogue, addressing fears, and creating pathways for collaboration. She realized that while they had made progress, there would still be challenges ahead. Not everyone would be satisfied, and resistance could rise again as the festival approached. But for the first time, Claire felt a sense of unity forming, an acknowledgement that they were in this together, bound by a shared love for their town. In the days that followed, Claire, Mark, and other committee members worked tirelessly to ensure the festival reflected the community's diverse voices. The momentum was palpable, and excitement began to permeate the air as plans solidified. Flyers were printed, local businesses began to prepare for their stalls, and art displays were organized. The town buzzed with anticipation, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. However, beneath the excitement lay a current of uncertainty. Claire was acutely aware of the potential for things to unravel at any moment. With each passing day, she found herself haunted by the specter of doubt. Would the festival be a success? Would it truly bring the community together? Or would it serve as a catalyst for renewed conflict? She knew they had taken significant strides, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. As the festival approached, Claire held her breath, hoping against hope that their efforts would bear fruit. She watched as the community rallied around the event, a tapestry woven from the threads of their shared history and future aspirations. It was a delicate balance, but Claire felt a flicker of optimism igniting within her. Perhaps they were on the brink of something transformative, a chance to redefine what it meant to be a part of Ravenswood. As she prepared for the festival, Claire remained committed to her vision of unity. She understood that it would take more than one event to mend the fractures within the community. It would require ongoing conversations, shared experiences, and a willingness to confront their fears head-on. Yet, as the sun set over Ravenswood, casting a warm glow across the town, Claire felt the promise of change in the air. The festival was not just an event. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon illuminating the path forward, encouraging them all to embrace the complexities of their shared existence. The day of the festival arrived with a brilliance that felt almost surreal. The sun poured its golden rays over Ravenswood, illuminating the vibrant decorations that adorned the town square. Banners and streamers danced in the gentle breeze, each color representing a piece of the town's history and future. Claire stood at the edge of the square, her heart racing as she took in the sights and sounds around her. The anticipation that had built over weeks now felt electrifying, a palpable energy that coursed through the crowd gathering for the event. As the morning unfolded, Claire watched families arrive, children laughing and darting through the throngs of people. Stalls featuring local crafts, foods, and artwork lined the streets, showcasing the very essence of Ravenswood. Each booth told a story of long-standing traditions, of families that had lived in the town for generations, and of newcomers eager to contribute to the community. Claire felt a sense of pride swell within her, recognizing that they were witnessing the embodiment of their collective hopes and dreams. As the festival officially kicked off, Claire stepped onto the makeshift stage set up in the center of the square. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement wash over her. Taking a deep breath, she addressed the crowd, her voice steady. "Welcome, everyone, to our first Festival of Unity. Today, we celebrate not just our history, but our shared future. Let's embrace the diverse voices that make Ravenswood what it is." Her words were met with cheers, the sense of camaraderie palpable in the air. The festival unfolded in a series of joyful moments. Children participated in art workshops, guided by local artists who encouraged them to express their creativity. Families indulged in traditional foods, with recipes passed down through generations, alongside new culinary innovations reflecting the town's evolving identity. Claire moved through the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude for the connections being forged around her. She could see people laughing, chatting, and engaging in meaningful conversations, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere that had plagued them only weeks prior. As the afternoon progressed, Claire noticed the dissenters mingling with supporters, their initial reservations slowly dissipating. Mark and some of his friends had taken on the role of guiding discussions at a storytelling booth, where residents shared tales of their experiences living in Ravenswood. Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her as she witnessed the barriers between them crumbling, replaced by a shared appreciation for their unique narratives. This was the heart of what they had envisioned, the opportunity to learn from one another. However, as the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the festival, Claire sensed a shift in the atmosphere. A group of dissenters, including the few who had expressed skepticism earlier, stood huddled together, their expressions troubled. Claire's heart sank as she approached them, worried that the unity they had built was beginning to fray. She couldn't help but recall the darker moments of the past, the confrontations that had threatened to tear them apart. "Is everything okay?" Claire asked, her voice tinged with concern. Mark stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "We're just worried that the festival, despite all its good intentions, might still overlook some of the issues we face as a community," he admitted, glancing around at the festivities. "It feels like a celebration, but we need to acknowledge the challenges we still have." Claire nodded, understanding his concerns. The moment felt pivotal. It was crucial to address their fears openly and honestly. "Mark, I appreciate your honesty," Claire replied, her tone earnest. "We've come a long way, but I recognize that the journey isn't over. It's essential that we keep the conversation going, even after today. This festival is just one step in our ongoing dialogue." Her words resonated with those gathered, and a sense of realization began to take root. They were not just here to celebrate. They were here to lay the groundwork for continued understanding and connection. Encouraged by Claire's response, the group began to share their thoughts more openly. They spoke about the challenges facing local businesses, the environmental concerns surrounding development, and the need for more inclusive community events that honored all voices. The discussion became a microcosm of the larger dialogue that had emerged during the festival. People began to gather around them, drawn by the earnestness of the conversation. It became a space for reflection amidst the celebration, allowing voices that had once felt silenced to be heard. As twilight settled over Ravenswood, the festival shifted gears. Claire proposed a candlelight commitment ceremony, where everyone could express their hopes for the future. Each participant was invited to light a candle and share a word or phrase that represented their vision for Ravenswood. Claire watched as people lined up, the atmosphere charged with a sense of purpose. The warm glow of the candles illuminated their faces, revealing expressions of determination and hope. When it was Claire's turn, she stood before the crowd, holding her candle aloft. "I hope for understanding," she declared, her voice resonating in the hushed square. "I hope that we can continue to build bridges, listen to one another, and create a community where everyone feels valued." As she spoke, others began to echo similar sentiments, each word building upon the last. The energy in the air transformed into a collective promise, a commitment to continue the journey together. As the last of the candles were lit, the square radiated with light. Claire took a step back, observing the scene unfold before her. She felt an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. They had weathered the storm of dissent, navigated the complexities of their shared history, and emerged stronger. The festival had become more than just a celebration. It had morphed into a turning point, a catalyst for continued dialogue and unity. As the evening drew to a close, Claire reflected on the significance of the day. The festival had brought Ravenswood together, showcasing the beauty of their diverse stories while recognizing the challenges that lay ahead. She understood that while this was a moment of celebration, it was also a reminder of the work that remained. The true test would come in the days, months, and years to follow. Would they continue to engage in meaningful dialogue, or would the ease of complacency creep back in? With the glow of the candles still illuminating her path, Claire felt a renewed sense of hope. The community had shown its resilience, its willingness to confront fears and build connections. As she looked around at the faces illuminated by candlelight, she felt a sense of belonging that transcended divisions. They were all part of something larger, a tapestry woven from the threads of history, hope, and shared dreams. In that moment, Claire realized that Ravenswood was not just a town, but a living entity shaped by the stories and experiences of its people. The journey of unity was ongoing, and while challenges would inevitably arise, they now had the tools to navigate those challenges together. The festival had sparked a light within the community, a flame of understanding and empathy that would continue to guide them forward. With a heart full of gratitude and determination, Claire embraced the dawn of a new chapter for Ravenswood. The path ahead would not be easy, but as long as they held on to the spirit of the festival, they would always find their way back to one another. The promise of unity, born from understanding and shared experiences, would illuminate their journey, lighting the way for future generations. In that moment, she knew they had taken a significant step toward a future where everyone could thrive, a true celebration of what it meant to be a part of Ravenswood.